If you aren't measuring EC, TDS, or ppm, you ought to be. Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. When it comes to growing cannabis, there are three key measurements that often get tossed around: EC, TDS, and ppm. But what do they really mean, and which one is the most important for your plant's success? Many growers can get caught up overthinking the details, but we're all familiar with the term, keep it simple. And that's what we'll do today. Many growers have written to me wondering which measurement is the most accurate, or which method their plants will respond to the best. Some swear by EC, while others claim TDS is the way to go. And then there are those who insist ppm is the only way to fly. But what's really going on here? There seems to be a lot of confusion. Are these measurements interchangeable, or is one truly better than the others? First, let's break down the initials. EC is short for electrical conductivity. TDS is short for total dissolved solids, and ppm is short for parts per million. Each of these measurements are meant to give growers an idea of the nutrient load in a solution or in mediums like cocoa, soil, and hydroponics. Most of the devices you will find to measure either EC, TDS, or ppm will typically include all three options. So let's explore how these three systems work, starting with EC. Important plant nutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and many others have an electrical charge, and water is a natural conductor. It's this ionic charge in the solution or soil that EC represents. The more nutrients and minerals in a solution or soil, the higher the EC will be. When solutions or soil are low in nutrients, they will have a low EC. Next up, we have TDS and ppm. They're kind of the same, but different. Many of you that own devices that measure EC, TDS, and ppm, you may have noticed that there is a 500 ppm scale and a 700 ppm scale. And here is the mind blower. TDS is the 500 ppm scale. 500 ppm, TDS, same thing, but it is calculated differently than the 700 ppm scale. TDS is meant to measure, or it's meant to be a measure of sodium chloride levels in a solution, whereas ppm is set up to measure the potassium chloride levels in a solution. TDS and ppm should be looking at different minerals to arrive at their answer. In reality, the measuring devices we're using aren't actually determining the true ppm of a solution. You would need chemical analysis for that. Instead, all of the TDS and ppm meters we are using to grow cannabis, they calculate the EC of a solution and then with simple math, convert it over to TDS or ppm. As you can see, the formula and conversion is fairly straightforward. If using the 500 ppm scale, you would multiply the EC by 500. Similarly, to arrive at the 700 ppm value, take the EC and multiply it by 700. You can see a full list of conversions on the screen now. Take a screenshot, it's pretty handy. But fortunately, the commonly used meters that we have will all do these calculations for us. This is the Blue Lab EC, TDS, ppm, pen, and truncheon, which are the industry standard for what professionals buy and use to measure these things. They're usually double the price of what a decent EC, TDS, and ppm pen will cost you, but you usually have to calibrate the cheaper ones more often, and they will usually have a wider margin of error. So don't go super cheap on this tool. Inaccurate information can lead to unhealthy plants. Expect to spend around $30 to $50 for a mid-level device, or around $100 for the Blue Lab equipment. So you may be asking, which method is better? Which one do I use? Well, the two commonly used in cannabis are EC and ppm, the 700 scale. And notice that I said cannabis. That is because other ppm scales, they do exist, and they're used in agriculture and hydroponic industries. Most professionals choose to measure in EC because it's a universal language. If a nutrient company recommends you add 200 ppm of a specific nutrient, well, which scale are they using? The 500 ppm scale or the 700 ppm scale? This unclarity can lead to costly mistakes, but if you said add 0.8 EC, there is no confusion about how much 0.8 EC actually is. Neither of these options, whether it be EC, TDS, or ppm, will actually tell you the specific amount of individual nutrients in a solution. They will simply give you an overall combined total. Using this information will help you drive growth in the various life stages like the seedling stage, vegetative, and flowering. Your EC levels will progressively be increased as the size of your root zone and the size of the plant grows. One thing that I absolutely have to mention here is pH. I can cover pH more in depth in another Westport University video, but EC is directly related to pH. Growing amazing cannabis is about balance, and this mantra rings true in the relationship between pH and EC. If the pH falls outside of a desired range, cannabis plants aren't able to uptake important nutrients. The decreased uptake can manifest itself as a deficiency in the plant. However, the nutrient load in the soil may be perfectly fine. Growers may be tempted to add more nutrients trying to correct this problem. However, this will cause the EC to rise greatly. Continually high EC can lead to salt buildup in the medium, and this will over time negatively affect the pH. Long drybacks will also cause the EC to rise in synthetically fed gardens, thus affecting the soil pH. Again, growing amazing cannabis is all about balance, and the relationship between EC and pH is an important one. So to recap, we've covered the basics of EC, TDS, and ppm, and why EC is the best measurement for growing cannabis. Remember, understanding these measurements is key to giving your plants exactly what they need to thrive. Let me know in the comments which method you prefer to use. Any of the three methods can be affected, so there really isn't a wrong answer here, but there is an industry standard, and that is EC. ChadWestport.com is where you can go to find my genetics and merch. Thank you for watching here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button if you aren't yet subscribed. New Westport University videos coming every week. So thank you for watching today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And remember everybody, to party on. Today, I'm going to save myself a ton of money by amending my soil. Now, amending the soil really means adding anything to it that's going to improve the chemical or structural nature of the soil. You could use things like fruits, vegetables, crop coverings, manures, anything that really will add to the nutrients. But for cannabis, I've got something specific that I like to use. So as you've seen in my grows, I've been using the Westport blend of soil. Now, it's really great soil, and instead of just throwing it out after being done with it once, I'm ready to use the dry nutrient pack from KISS Organics to amend the soil and reuse it again. And today, I'm going to walk you through that process. All right, so after laying my tarp out, you just want to make sure that it is clean of any other debris or dust, stuff that you don't want coming back inside in with your soil. So give it a good sweep first. All right, so the next step is we are taking our spent soil. As you can see, these are 20-gallon containers. They're about half full each. So really I got about 20 gallons of used soil here. I'm just going to take this and dump it out. Oh yeah, it's kind of dusty. That's why we do this outside, guys. All right, that's one. Let's dip this one out right now. And two. All right, so the next thing we want to do is just kind of like flatten this out, lay it out so it can evenly get our nutrients in there. As you can see, got my shovel to do that. I've got my rake, which is nice and handy because you can also kind of pull some roots out of there if you need. And for that, even on a more micro level, I've got this one as well. Kind of sort, scoop out roots, all of that. So yeah, let's get this flattened out here. All right, let's kind of go through and scoop for roots. See if we have big root balls in here or not. I don't really see anything piling up on this side. Let's go and do it the other direction now. All right, we're getting close to even here. And as you see, some of these roots pop to the top. I'll just pull these out. All right, and in the end, that's about how much extra root mass I pulled out of the soil. So not much. I took care of my root balls elsewhere, but now we need to blend the soil. All right, so to amend the soil, I am using the KISS nutrient pack. This is actually a Twin Peaks Chad Westport blend. You guys may be seeing more of that soon, but I'm also using some worm castings, some Vermibec worm castings from some good people up in Canada. They had sent me those, so I'm going to be applying those into the soil to amend it and give it more nutrient charge for the new plantings. The KISS Organics nutrient pack is recommended at 0.8 to 1.6 ounces per gallon of soil. And again, I have about 30 gallons of soil, or no, sorry, 20 gallons of soil here. I'm going to go with 1.5 ounces per gallon of soil. That brings me a total of 30 ounces of dry amendments from the nutrient pack I'm going to put on. And for the worm castings, I'm going to go at about double of that ratio. I'm going to go with 3 ounces per gallon, so that's about 60 ounces of the worm castings going to mix into the soil. All right, so to help me in this process, you know your little watering cup? Well, if you flip it around from the milliliter side, you'll actually see that it has cups and ounces. So this is going to help me measure things out. And a lot of times, with dry amendments like this, it's always good to wear a respirator because as you'll see, when I'm pouring this stuff, there's a lot floating in the air. So always wear a respirator when you're pouring your dry amendments. All right, so let's level this off here. And again, we're looking for about 30 ounces of this for the 20 gallons of soil. And I'm sitting, oh, I'm right at 32. Come on, let's go with it. 32 ounces, let's go. All right, guys, so a couple things when you're actually putting this into the soil. Yes, we do have to mix it in, but don't just dump it in one spot. You want to try to apply it as evenly as you can, but also don't do it from, way up high because, again, this is going to powder and get into the air, and then why the heck did you use precise measurements if you're just letting most of it float away? So yeah, we're just trying to get an even spread of nutrients, which we're going to come back and we're going to mix in by hand. We'll mix it in with the rake, we'll mix it in with the shovel, we'll do a little bit of watering, multiple things you could do here. And if you notice too, I am doing my best not to step on the soil because again, you don't want to compact it. We are going to stir it and mix it up, but again, if you can avoid stepping all over your soil, do so. Okay, so we got about 12 ounces left.
I'm just going to kind of just start going across. Again, we're doing our best to get this as even as we can, and we still have our worm casting to add in here too. All right, that's it for the nutrient pack. All right, next we go for the worm casting. Same deal. Try to get it spread as evenly as you can. And when you're going through your worm casting, if there's just like big balls or chunks in there, try to break it up into smaller pieces before you put it on. But don't worry, guys, I've got 2 of these I need to put on. So one for one side, the other for the other. All right, so before I get back in there with, the shovel and the rake, I just kind of like to go in here with my hands and mix up some of the stratosphere. Because again, I can put my fingers all the way to the bottom. I can then kind of toss the nutrients together, and it's still kind of keeping it in the same zone. So it's not like you're shifting all of it to one side and then the other. Still kind of trying to keep it fairly mixed up. Remember to blend your edges, because the edges usually don't get the nutrients poured right on top of them. But yeah, just kind of go around and do this, and then I will get back in there with the shovel and the rake and mix it even further. All right, so now that everything is kind of locally blended by hand, just come in here. I'm gonna start turning stuff over, start mixing your soil. Again, you can't over mix the soil, but you can definitely under mix it, guys. So don't be afraid to spend a little bit of time and effort on this step. If you have a small enough amount and you're in the tarp, you can just almost kind of lift the end of the tarp here and play that fun game of just, woo, watch it all shift. And then you just go back and forth with it, rock it back and forth. That's a good way to kind of mix things up. Kind of pull it back down and then do it all over again. But yeah, first step, hands. Second step, shovel. All right, I'm probably breathing heavy by this point, but I've got it all, mixed, folded back and forth with the tarps, shoveled, and I'm pretty happy with how it's blended. But now I'm just gonna flatten it out one more time with my rake and get everything nice and even before the next step. All right, so it's all flattened out again. Our next step is I'm gonna take my hose and we're just gonna give it a light dusting of water. Kind of get it a little bit moist, kick some of the ingredients into action. You don't want overly dry soil. You don't want things to be hydrophobic, but they were staying fairly, well, there was a little bit of moisture when they were in the can, so we were good there. Just gonna give it, a little bit of water, let it soak on through. And I'm gonna leave it out here to dry for just a little bit. And then the final step, which you'll see here in just a second. All right, so the last thing to do here is bag it up. All right. Actually, I'm seeing it's a little bit dry on the bottom, so maybe I'll give it another sprinkle here real quick, light sprinkle. All right, so I went back and I added a little bit more water to this, bringing up the moisture content. And now I am getting it into the bags. And there you have it, 4 brand new bags of soil, fully loaded with nutrients, ready to go for pennies on the dollar. So again, guys, in a few easy, simple steps, you can amend your soil and reuse it. And there you go. It really is that easy, guys. It just takes time. It takes a place to store the used soil to build up to, a meaningful amount as a home grower to go back and amend it. You don't want to just amend a 3-gallon pot. So yeah, save it in some trash bins, put it all together, amend it like you just saw me, and make sure you do water it down to field capacity, which means it's dripping out the bottom, and then let it sit for a little bit. And then you bag it up, and you're good to go. So thank you for watching this video. I am Chad Westport. Stay locked on the Chad Westport YouTube channel. If you like and subscribe, even better, share this video. That helps me a lot. If you want to pick up some gear or collectible merchandise from me, chadwestport.com is the website. And I've got a whole bunch of discount codes to save you even more money. Those are all down in the show notes. So again, thank you for watching today. I hope you all enjoyed. And remember, everybody, to party on. If your seeds are failing to start,
make sure it isn't from one of these 5 things. Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. Germinating seeds is where the adventure begins. You may have heard about a variety of methods for germinating your cannabis seeds from other growers or online. The truth is, there are many right ways to germinate your seeds, but there are also common mistakes that lead to failure. And when we're popping expensive or rare cannabis seeds, every single one of them counts. So today, I'll cover the common germination methods and the top 5 dangers to watch out for. Germinating using the glass of water method is what I like to do. And to do this, you add your seeds to a cup of water, and usually within 48 hours, they have cracked open and the white taproot is emerging. There is a myth out there that if they sink, they are good, and if they float, they are bad. This is not true. Some that sink may stink, and others that float may be your goat. I've had taproots growing from a floating seed, and it continued to float. The largest danger with this method is letting the taproot get too soggy. If your seed has sunk and it is cracked, it is best practice to remove the seed from the water and place it into the soil when you see the white taproot emerging, also known as the radicle. It is possible to drown the seedling, as too much water for too long can reduce it to mush. And for growers who love all of the details, tap water is usually fine. But if you want to pH the water, aim for 6.0, and the ideal water temperature is 68 degrees. No nutrients are required, and this applies to each of the methods that I am mentioning. Next up, we have the paper towel method, which is the most commonly used method. Growers place their seeds between a moist but not dripping wet paper towel, and then place the folded paper towel into a plastic bag or container to maintain high humidity levels. Many times growers will place this bag on a heat mat, and this is where the danger lies. Heat mats are good. They help speed up germination, but they can be too hot. Now, the heat mats we get from Spider Farmer, AC Infinity, or VivoSun, etc., they're all good choices, and they shouldn't overheat or cook your germinating seeds. But they can still cause the paper towel to dry out, and that can kill your seedlings. So if using this method, be sure to check on the hydration level of your paper towel multiple times per day. Some growers like to use Rockwool cubes or starter plugs for germinating their cannabis seeds. And now Rockwool has been used for decades to germinate seeds before moving them into the soil or hydroponic systems. The real danger here, the potential seed killer, is if you don't pre-soak or pH balance your cubes or the plugs. Never assume that each batch is good to go. Do a pre-soak, balance the pH, and check for off-the-chart EC or ppm levels. Now, before we get to the final germination method, I wanted to touch on another big danger when it comes to germination rate of your precious seeds, and that is storage. There are a variety of ways to store cannabis seeds, and many people have strong opinions on how to do it best. But here are a few of the dangers that we all can agree on. One is heat. Storage temperatures above 65 degrees will reduce germination rates over time. The higher the temperatures that your seeds are stored in, the lower the germination rate will be. Number two is humidity. Higher levels of humidity are known to reduce the viability of cannabis seeds during storage. And fluctuating temperatures can induce condensation in the presence of high humidity. And this is why it isn't recommended to frequently be taking seeds out of cold storage if using that type of storage. Best practices suggest that you should store your seeds in a dark, climate-controlled, and cool location with low humidity. Store them in a sealed, airtight container, and oftentimes growers like myself will throw some desiccant packs inside the container as just another layer of protection from moisture. Now, studies have shown that even when seeds are stored properly, their viability drops slightly each year starting at about the third year of storage. So to avoid the danger of losing your favorite line, be sure to open your collection and do a fresh seed increase every 4 to 5 years. Finally, we have the direct sow method. This is where you place your seed directly into the soil and let it grow from there. Growers should bury their seeds roughly 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch in the soil and then add water to encourage the germination. Now, this method usually takes a few extra days because not only does it need to germinate, but it needs to push its way above the soil. And one of the most common dangers of starting fragile seeds in popular soil mixes is that the nutrient load in them may be too much and it can fry the baby taproots. Now, I mean, think about it. You probably love the soil you're using because you don't have to feed it for a while because it has good nutrient charge. Now, that can be potentially hazardous to that fresh taproot. But what happens when the seedling never pops up? If you're like me, you go exploring through the soil like an archaeologist looking for that seed. And sometimes what you discover can be horrifying. And this is a real danger when doing direct sow. How many of you have planted a seed only to have it not pop up? And when you went looking for it, you saw something moving next to it in the soil. Here's an excellent example of what may be ruining your precious new seeds. As you can see, we have movement inside the seed shell. But what is it? What is it doing? And why the heck is it there? An immediate thought, at least for me, would be fungus gnat larvae. But if you look at the worms on the screen and the fungus gnat larvae, you'll notice that the fungus gnat larvae have a black head, which these do not. So I reached out to my go-to bug expert, Matthew Gates of Zentinol Consulting, and he helped me identify these little seed destroyers. Matthew advised me that these are potworms. This isn't really a threat in cocoa or rockwool or hydro, but it tends to occur more in soil with high organic matter and a higher moisture level. Is this exclusive to cannabis? No, it's just a coincidence that it's called a potworm. But seriously guys, once the taproot reaches a certain size, damage from those potworms can be tolerated. But at the very beginning, when the seed just opens and they get in there, the embryo can be destroyed by the potworms feeding on the soft tissue. And as you can see in these final clips, after about 15 minutes of their exposure to the air, they dry up and die. So They are living in the soil, and this is one of the biggest dangers you'll face when using the direct sow method. What has your experience been? Have you ever noticed little worms eating your new seeds? Let me know all about it down in the comments section. And while you're at it, what is your favorite method to germinate cannabis seeds? I've seen some creative ones, so lay it on me. ChadWestport.com is where you can go to find my genetics and merch. Thank you for watching here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button if you aren't yet subscribed. New Westport University videos coming up. So thank you for watching today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And remember to party on! Terpenes are greatly responsible for the aromas of your favorite cultivars. Terpenes appear all over in nature. Terpenes have medicinal properties, and they are frequently used in everyday consumer products. More importantly, they can enhance the benefits of our favorite medicine and steer your experience in a particular direction, as demonstrated by the aromatherapy industry. This series will cover the frequently found terpenes in cannabis. You'll learn where to find terpenes, how they are used, and what they can offer us medicinally. So let's go! This introductory episode is going to explain everything terpenes. Terpenes are small molecules primarily produced by plants. Terpenes are found in the essential oils, which, in our favorite plant, the essential oils are found in the trichome heads. In nature, terpenes serve many purposes. Plants use terpenes as tools to deter pests and animals, but they also use terpenes to attract pollinators. Terpenes like bee farnesene can mimic the pheromones released by aphids as a warning to other aphids to flee. So, some cannabis plants can produce this terpene if under attack in an attempt to trick the aphids into fleeing. It's a pretty smart plant we're dealing with. Terpenes like pinene and myrcene are extra sticky, and they exist in the plant's essential oils where they work as an effective sticky trap. These terpenes are commonly used in professional sticky traps like the ones used to catch mice and rats, and they're used in order to make them more sticky. Most people are familiar with citronella in mosquito traps, oils, and candles. Citronellol is the active terpene. Some terpenes can act like a fumigant, deterring pests from wanting to inhabit the plant, and others can be toxic on contact for insects. Terpenes serve a wide array of purposes. In cannabis, the monoterpenes have been shown to repel insect herbivores. The sesquiterpenes, which can produce a bitter taste, they've been shown to primarily deter grazing animals like deer and rabbits. Plants form terpenes by interlocking chains of isoprene into an organic compound. Terpenes can occur as hydrocarbons, alcohols, ketones, esters, aldehydes, and other forms. Isoprene has 5 carbon atoms bound to 8 hydrogen atoms, which is written like C5H8. To form a terpene, 2 or more of these isoprene units must bond. The process of this formation is what is known as Wallach's law, which you can look into further. It may surprise you though that you'll have to go back to the 1800s to find his work. This is not a new subject. There are many classes of terpenes. Terpene classes are determined by how many C5H8 isoprene units are in the terpene molecule. Hemiterpenes have 1 unit of isoprene. Monoterpenes have 2 isoprene units, resulting in C10H16, which is 10 carbon atoms, 16 hydrogen atoms. Sesquiterpenes have 3 isoprene units, resulting in C15H24. Diterpenes have 4 isoprene units, resulting in C20H32. Sester terpenes have 5 isoprene units, resulting in C25H40. And you can keep going. Triterpenes have 6 isoprene units, and tetraterpenes have 8, and so on. In cannabis, the majority of terpenes consist of monoterpenes, sesquiterpenes, and diterpenes. There are different classifications of each group based on molecular arrangement, but to keep it simple, we'll stick with these primary groups. Examples of monoterpenes include linalool, pinene, myrcene, limonene, and eucalyptol. Humulene, beta-caryophyllene, and farnesol are common sesquiterpenes, with phytol and other cannabinoids being diterpenes. We'll cover all of these individually in future episodes. You may have also heard the word terpenoid. A terpenoid is just a terpene that also has one or more oxygen atoms. These oxygen atoms can change the function of the molecule as well as how it interacts with other molecules. The suffix oid specifically notes that oxygen atoms are present in the molecule. As an example, cannabinoid, terpenoid, flavonoid. We know because of that oid suffix that they all have one oxygen atom or more attached to the molecule. Different terpene classes will volatilize, aka evaporate or vaporize, into the air at different rates. Monoterpenes and sesquiterpenes are the most volatile, and they can evaporate into the air at lower temperatures compared to a diterpene. Most of the cannabis terpenes are monoterpenes or sesquiterpenes, which is why the way you grow and store your flower is important for keeping the aromas. When learning about cannabis terpenes, the words entourage effect are going to frequently come up. This is a term that was used by Dr. Ethan Russo in the seminal paper Taming THC in 2011. Dr. Ethan Russo is a name you will hear a lot. He's considered one of the leading researchers in the field, and he's produced a wide range of peer-reviewed papers. He oversaw the development of Epidiolex, a cannabis-derived CBD-based medicine approved by the FDA for treatment of Dravet syndrome. Epidiolex is a medicine that treats severe seizures and was produced by GW Pharmaceuticals, now known as Jazz Pharma. Although entourage effect is a good descriptor, the common language regarding the beneficial combination of cannabinoids and terpenes is called synergy. So let's quickly break down the two terms and how they are distinct in the eyes of researchers. The entourage effect describes multiple components in cannabis all acting together, with one or two primary active compounds being supported by multiple inactive compounds, all taking place within our endocannabinoid system. Synergy. Synergy describes the enhanced effects caused by interactions between two or more compounds, with most of the compounds involved being considered active. This synergy can exist outside of the endocannabinoid system too. The most significant difference between the two terms is that synergy implies active compounds, whereas entourage effect is associated more with inactive compounds. A good example of synergy in cannabis is the aroma and flavor. Terpenes and terpenoids in the flowers are volatilizing together to produce the aroma. They are not experienced as singular constituents. You may have heard the term whole plant medicine. It's why people like myself prefer to consume flower as opposed to a distillate or a concentrated product. Most people will agree that eating an orange for vitamin C is more beneficial than taking a vitamin C pill. Why? Well, because of the synergy that is found with other active compounds in the orange. It's more complete. Let's not fool ourselves though. We are still discovering active compounds in cannabis, and we are still learning how and where they all interact within our bodies. This knowledge is a literal work in progress. But thanks to previous research on plant-generated terpenes and their interactions with humans, we can logically deduce that the same molecules produced by cannabis can have similar effects in our bodies. In 2001, McPartland and Russo published a review of medical cannabis research finding support that non-cannabinoid compounds in cannabis enhance the beneficial effects of THC. The authors attributed terpenes and flavonoids as playing a role in the combined activity. This has also been supported further in mice studies a few years later, where cannabis extract resulted in a faster onset of therapeutic effects and a reduction in time to achieve the maximum effects compared to the isolated and pure delta-9 THC molecule. Many other examples exist. For instance, in 2018, an analysis of clinical studies on epilepsy concluded that 2/3 of the patients treated with CBD-rich extract reported reduced seizure frequency and lower average dose compared to patients treated with pure CBD. The CBD extract group also suffered fewer adverse effects. That same year, another study was published that made similar observations in regards to synergistic effects. It reported that pure THC caused more anxiety than whole cannabis. The whole cannabis sample had the benefit of including various terpenes and other compounds, which formed a synergistic effect. Not every researcher is on board with the concept of entourage effects. In the past few years, we've seen more studies looking at the anti-synergy argument. In 2019, a study found that none of the 6 most common terpenes in cannabis activated the CB1 or CB2 receptors. Other researchers have stated that because of the low levels of volatile monoterpenes in cannabis products, phytonutrients like terpenes most likely could not accumulate to therapeutic levels. One of the most critical papers, titled "The Entourage Effect or Hodgepodge Hashish: The Questionable Rebranding, Marketing, and Expectations of Cannabis." Holy cow. Well, that takes a different opinion. And the main argument of the author was that solicitations and claim invoking the entourage effects should be regulated as any other explicit therapeutic claim, as they are enticing the buyer to make a purchase based on the promise of a benefit. And I don't entirely disagree with that, but it doesn't say much about if it really exists or not. It just says it should be anyways, I'm diverting here. But unfortunately, due to the limits on cannabis research at a federal level, meaningful studies testing the proposed entourage effects and pathways have not been carried out. However, that isn't to say this knowledge hasn't already been obtained by private businesses, namely the pharmaceutical industry, who treat the endocannabinoid system as a major target for future therapeutic treatments. Instead of leaving you in doubt, let me leave you with a quote from Raphael Mechoulam, the godfather of cannabinoid research. "Not all terpenes or flavonoid compounds are synergistic with all other compounds in all other circumstances. However, although there is significant therapeutic value in individual compounds, when it comes to terpenes and flavonoids, the secondary general action of these compounds is often synergistic. Synergistic action of terpenes and other phytochemicals is logical and well supported in the literature outside of cannabis." You have heard me use the word flavonoid more than a few times today, and I want to clear up exactly what that is in cannabis, because it has little to do with actual flavor of your flower. True, flavonoids can be responsible for the bitter, astringent, or sweet attributes in some food products, but in cannabis, flavonoids are primarily responsible for attracting pollinators, defending against pests, and really giving the plant its vibrant colors. Anthocyanin, aka the purple that we see in cannabis, is a form of flavonoid. The term flavonoid originates from the Latin term flavus, which means yellow. Join me as I dive into the world of indoor growing to see if pumping CO2 really boosts your yields to the max. Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. A hot topic among indoor growers is the use of CO2. Professionals with big grows, they swear by it, claiming that it supercharges their plants' growth, while many home growers are skeptical about the costs and the effort. We often think about the nutrients that we put into the soil as being the primary driver of plant growth, but we often forget that light, water, and CO2 are catalysts for photosynthesis. Without CO2, we would have no photosynthesis and no growth. Supplementing CO2 has been shown to have a positive effect on cannabis growth. By increasing the ability to photosynthesize, plants are able to grow quicker, stronger, and bigger. Having increased yields and faster harvests are the goals shared by many cannabis growers, whether they grow at scale or in a small bedroom closet. Growers will try many techniques to gain these advantages. A common method for supplementing CO2 by the home grow community is the use of mushroom bags, bottled CO2, or dry ice. Other DIY methods like baking soda and vinegar, or fermentation using sugar, water, and yeast, they're all kind of common. But the professionals typically use CO2 tanks or burners to cover the much larger areas. There are small CO2 tanks that can be used at the home level, but I would never encourage someone to use a CO2 burner for tent growing. That's just ludicrous. All right. Before I tell you what the desired CO2 ranges are in the different life stages of the plant, let me offer a technical description of exactly how CO2 benefits your plants. The Calvin cycle, sometimes referred to as C3, is a series of biochemical reactions that occur during the light-on phase as a direct result of photosynthesis. Light energy is used to convert water and other compounds into gases such as oxygen and chemicals like ATP and NADPH within the plant. Now, the chemical energy produced from the light reaction is used by the enzyme ribisco for carbon fixation. And chemical energy produced from this reaction converts carbon dioxide and water into carbon compounds that will eventually form glucose, aka sugars. Now, these invisible actions are what form the Calvin cycle, of which CO2 is an essential component. We know that increased CO2 can increase photosynthesis, which will promote increased growth and larger yields. The role that CO2 plays is important, but is it something that home growers need to be supplementing? The benefits of increased CO2 in the grow tent would be wasted if a few other factors weren't met. A few questions that should always be asked from the start is, how good of a grower are you? Because unhealthy plants won't benefit from added CO2. Supplementing a grow tent with CO2 is not something that is going to make a bad grower into a good grower. Plants need to be at optimal health levels, meaning their hydration and nutrition must be at peak performance. Well, another question is, what is your budget? Supplementing CO2 will increase your electricity bill through the need for increased lighting and environmental controls to create the ideal conditions for CO2 uptake. And I'll break this down momentarily. It will also increase your materials costs. Do you have the tools to measure the ppm of your nutrient feed, or a meter to calculate your ppfd, which is the usable light? Those are very important parameters to know when supplementing CO2. The most important question, though, is, are you growing in a sealed environment? To take full advantage of supplemental CO2, light intensity must be increased beyond normal conditions. A byproduct of increasing light intensity is additional heat in the grow tent. And although the additional heat is beneficial for CO2 absorption, cooling equipment may still be required to balance temperatures with the higher light output. Cannabis plants exchange gases and water from the tiny pores on the underside of the leaves called stomata. Now, although CO2 encourages the guard cells to regulate the opening and closing of the stomata, they opt for the closed position. The increased heat, though, in the tent and the increased leaf surface temperature, sometimes referred to as LST, that causes the stomata to remain open so they could take in more CO2 and perform photosynthesis at a higher rate. Open stomata, though, will increase humidity. Because the stomata remain open for longer, the humidity levels will increase in the grow tent through the process of transpiration. A dehumidifier may be needed to maintain this environmental factor in the desired range. Now, supplemental CO2 for cannabis is commonly used throughout the flowering stage. And the flowering stage is when keeping lower humidity in your grow tent is most important. A significant design factor that separates many commercial grows from home cultivation is whether the growing environment is sealed or not. Sealed rooms do not exhaust or intake air. Environmental conditions are controlled within the room, and CO2 is supplemented due to the lack of fresh air coming in the room. Now, grow tents are not considered sealed growing environments. And here's a big one. CO2 supplementation should only take place during the lights on phase. The primary benefit of CO2 is increased photosynthesis. And, well, we should all know, photosynthesis only happens with the lights on. This fact is why products like mushroom bags and other products that release a 24/7 stream of CO2 are partially a waste of your money. You have no control over when or how much CO2 is released. CO2 is 1.5 times heavier than air, so your distribution point of CO2 should be placed above your canopy. And as the CO2 is released above the canopy, it will kind of fall downwards into the plants. So make sure that you're using fans to circulate the air within the grow space, because that helps the CO2 from collecting at the bottom of your tent. And regardless of how you are supplementing CO2, you should always have a way to monitor the levels accurately. Popular sensors in the tents of home growers include the Pulse Pro and products from AC Infinity. These devices offer the ability to track the history of your CO2 levels, but they can also send real-time data about CO2 levels directly to your phone. Claims that seedlings need CO2 are slightly misguided. Seedlings don't do well under very strong lights. And we also know that seedlings and young vegetative plants have small root systems. So suppose the root system is too small and the CO2 too abundant. Well, in that case, it can actually cause a downregulation of photosynthesis, which will negatively affect the plant. Downregulation of photosynthesis is the process of decreased function and production at a cellular level. This can occur in an abundance of CO2 if the root zone is not large enough to store the carbohydrates and sugars produced by photosynthesis. A lack of nitrogen availability in the soil, that can also trigger downregulation in the presence of elevated CO2. As the plant develops a larger root system in the vegetative stage, this is often when CO2 supplementation will start. By the flowering stage of growth, the root system is well developed. The root system can handle the additional transpiration and carbohydrate storage demand from having the higher levels of CO2. The plant, it can also withstand the added light intensity and higher leaf surface temperatures required to maximize the benefits of adding CO2 into your grow. As your CO2 levels increase and the plant creates more energy from photosynthesis, growers will need to adjust their feeding levels. The elevated levels of photosynthesis are going to require more nutrients in the soil for the plants to consume, primarily nitrogen. A lack of plant available nitrogen can negate the benefits of adding CO2. Most growers will reduce the CO2 levels back to a natural level of 400 ppm in the final week or two before harvest, so it's not push it all the way. You back off on it, kind of like nutrients. But here is a chart showing you the recommended levels of CO2 for growing, but also the levels of CO2 that can cause a health risk to humans and pets. Carbon monoxide detectors often don't detect CO2, but there are many CO2 specific detectors available. So if supplementing CO2, I feel it is worth the investment. Be safe. Signs of too much CO2 for the plant include looking weak and yellow, including necrotic and chlorotic leaf spots. It's kind of the brown dead spots, basically what it is. But between 0 and 200, you get no growth. The ambient levels of CO2 is about 400, and seedlings, they can handle 400, so you don't need to supplement. Veg, 600 to 700 ppm, that's where a lot of people run it, and in late veg, 800 to 1200. Now flower is when you're really pushing it. Flower can be 1200 to 1500 ppm of CO2, and then like I said, you reduce it pre-harvest, 800, kind of back down to 400. The maximum you would ever want to hit is 1800, actually diminishing returns at that point, so don't even go there, because the health hazards start at about 2000 to 5000 ppm. You could get headaches, drowsiness, loss of focus, increased heart rate, and if you're going above 5000, that's a serious risk. So again, have a way to monitor it if you're using it, if you're in the house, if there's pets, all of that, because CO2 is heavier than the air we breathe, and it can be found in higher concentrations lower to the floor. So pets actually stand a higher risk than we do. And to calculate the amount of CO2 needed to raise the ppm of the air to 1000, you need to do some math. It's pretty simple though. So to reach 1000 ppm in a specific area, you want to multiply the length times the width times the height times 0.001. The answer will provide you with the cubic feet of CO2 needed to raise the levels in your grow room to 1000 ppm. And just as a reference point, CO2 is often sold by the pound in tanks, and 1 pound of CO2 equals 8.7 cubic feet. So here is a little cheat sheet for doing the math to calculate the desired CO2 levels in your grow space. So the question is, Should you add CO2 to your grow tent? And here's where I feel like I may be a bit of a Debbie Downer. Supplementing a home cannabis grow with CO2 is not something that is going to make a bad grower into a good grower. Again, plants need to be at optimal health levels, meaning their hydration and nutrition must be at peak performance. Lighting needs to be specifically tuned in relation to the elevated levels of CO2, and without tools to measure light intensity or ppm of CO2, home growers are just guessing. As for the cons to the DIY chemical reaction methods that I mentioned earlier, there are a few, but most of the DIY solutions for CO2 generation require daily or hourly maintenance to facilitate constant CO2 output. And the levels created by these methods are often insignificant. They're not significant enough to reach your target level, guys. In a sustained matter, in any matter, just they're cute, okay? That's what I say. They're cheap attempts and often fall short, although they are sound in principle. Again, this is where things sound good on paper, but in reality, meh, right? More importantly, if we as home growers are exhausting the entire volume of air inside our grow tents every 1 to 2 minutes, we would be adding CO2 just to pump it immediately out. Sealed room environments are superior because none of the air or the CO2 is removed from the room. All of these reasons are why we see CO2 supplementation used professionally, but not very often in home cannabis cultivation. Boosting the growth rate through the utilization of supplemental CO2 is dependent on the light intensity, the leaf surface temperature, the size of the container, and the maturity of the root zone, as well as the available nutrition in the soil, namely nitrogen. Without them, growth response is limited. I tend to recommend CO2 usage once all of the other variables are dialed in and growers are comfortable in their skills. Personally, I do not supplement CO2, and I have been happy with my results. What has your experience with CO2 supplementation been? Have you tried any of the DIY methods that I mentioned above? How did it go? Let me know down in the comments and help spread the knowledge to the ever-expanding global cannabis community. Together we learn, together we share better herbs. ChadWestport.com is where you can go to find my genetics and collectible merch. Thank you for watching here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button if you aren't yet subscribed. New Westport University videos coming up. So thank you for watching today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And remember to party on! With today's video, your cannabis lighting knowledge is going to quickly and easily grow, which will lead to better buying decisions and ultimately larger yields. Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. When it comes to indoor gardening, one of the most critical components is the grow light. It's what helps your plants thrive, and without it, they'd be stuck in the dark. Quite literally. Choosing the right grow light is essential, as it can make all the difference between a successful harvest and a disappointing one. But with so many options available, it's easy to get overwhelmed and end up with a light that doesn't quite live up to your expectations. One of the common misconceptions about grow lights is that they're all the same. That's simply not true. Another myth is that the more powerful lights are always better, which is not necessarily the case. Many gardeners also think that grow lights are a one-size-fits-all solution, but in reality, different plants have different needs. The lack of understanding about grow lights leads to poor choices, which can ultimately affect the health and productivity of your plants. Adding to the confusion is the sheer number of options available. From LED to fluorescent, HID to induction, the choices are almost endless. And within each type, there are varying levels of quality, making it difficult for growers to make an informed decision. The result is a lot of trial and error, which can be costly and frustrating. But don't worry, I've done that part for you. When it comes down to it, some grow lights outperform others due to a combination of factors. Efficiency is crucial, as it affects not only your energy bill, but also the heat produced by the light. The spectrum of the light is also vital, as different plants respond better to specific spectrums. And of course, heat management is another critical aspect, as excessive heat can damage your plants or create the need to run other costly equipment to compensate, like air conditioners. By understanding these factors, you can make a more informed decision when choosing a grow light. So let's get into the information and terminology you will need to know to make an informed purchasing decision. The two main types of lighting you will see in commercial and hobbyist cannabis gardens are HID and LED systems. HID is short for high intensity discharge, which often uses two types of bulbs. MH is short for metal halide. These bulbs have a higher percentage of the blue spectrum in the output and would often be used during the vegetative stage. HPS, which is short for high pressure sodium, is often the bulb used during the flowering stage due to its warmer color and elevated levels of the red spectrum. From the late 1970s all the way until the 2010s, this was the most common lighting system in cannabis grow rooms. LED is short for light-emitting diodes. These style of lights use hundreds of tiny diodes to produce light instead of a single bulb. In the past decade, LED lighting has become the #1 lighting source for home growers. LED lights are more efficient, which reduces your power bill, and the efficiency also reduces the heat produced by the light. Higher wattage LED lights have become more affordable, although they are still more expensive than HID systems up front. But the LED lights have a much longer lifespan comparatively, and with the HID systems, you have to buy new expensive bulbs typically a couple times each year. So each system does offer some slightly unique advantages, which is why some professional growers are starting to use a mixed spectrum lighting, which is the use of both HID and LED. As home growers though, we don't always have room in the tent to run both. So the more efficient LED lighting is what most people use. Terminology is important to know when you are buying a grow light. I can tell you which terms are helpful and which ones aren't needed. So let's start with the terms often used in a lighting conversation, but don't actually apply to cannabis growing. Lumens. Lumens are for humans. It is the way we measure the brightness to the human eye. But plants, they see light differently than humans. So in a nutshell, the higher the lumens, the brighter the light is to us. But the plants could care less about lumens. Remember, lumens are for humans. And then there's lux. Lux is a measure of light intensity received by a specific area. It's a formula that helps us measure the total of visible light, but again, remember, the plants don't see light the same as humans. Which brings me to Kelvin. Kelvin is a unit of color temperature measurement. It doesn't relate to heat at all, but it is how we get the terms of like soft white or daylight when it comes to light bulbs. Again, plants aren't very concerned with Kelvin or lux or lumens, so let's cover the terms that actually matter to plants, as you'll often see in LED light descriptions. PAR. PAR is short for photosynthetically active radiation. PAR is the range of the light spectrum that plants use to drive photosynthesis. The PAR range is measured by wavelengths, and it ranges from 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers, and sometimes slightly higher. Below 400 nanometers is UV light, and above 750 nanometers is the infrared range, neither of which drives photosynthesis. Because plants benefit from elevated levels of blue and red wavelengths, cannabis grow lights will have a PAR map that looks like this. You will see a dip in the green and the yellow wavelengths. This is because they are less conducive to photosynthesis. PPFD. PPFD is short for photosynthetic photon flux density, and this is an important number to know because it is the measurement of how much usable light is being received by the plant canopy. There's also PPF, which is short for photosynthetic photon flux, but that is simply the measurement of how much the light fixture is putting out. PPFD is the measurement that we care most about because that is the usable light that the plant receives. So when shopping for cannabis grow lights, the numbers in these little squares are representing the PPFD of the light at the designated hanging height. We also have PPE, which is short for photosynthetic photon efficiency. This calculates how efficiently the light turns electricity into usable light. PPE is one area that widely separates LED from HID systems. LED lights are more efficient and they will have a higher PPE number. You may oftentimes see PPE described in U-moles, which is micromoles per second. The higher that number, the higher the efficiency. And wow, I know that was a lot of initials there, but I didn't sneak in a C3PO or an R2D2 on you. All of those are real, and I appreciate you hanging through that. So now that we have some of the important terminology out of the way, you may be curious, how strong does the grow light need to be? Well, the general thought for LED lighting is about 35 to 40 watts per square foot. So if you have a 2x2 tent, that is 4 square feet, and you should have at least 140 to 160 watts of light. If you're in a 4x4 grow tent, that is 16 square feet, and growers should aim for a light with about 560 to 640 watts. If using the less efficient HID lighting systems, 50 watts per square foot is the recommended minimum. I personally recommend buying a light that has a dimmer feature and is slightly above the wattage you currently need. I also like to have a light that fits my grow tent corner to corner. This allows for a better, more even light distribution between the center of the tent and the corners of the tent. And that leads us to footprint and the question, what is the best shape or configuration for LED grow lights? The two main styles you will see are the board type, commonly referred to as quantum boards, and then there is the bar style lighting. Bar style lighting has slowly taken over from the quantum board shape, and that's for good reason. Bar style lighting allows for better air movement in the tent and around the lights. This helps reduce heat trapped at the canopy level by big square boards. Bar style LED lights also allow for a better, more even distribution of light. As you can see in these diagrams, the PPFD numbers for the board style LED are higher in the center, but quickly fall as you get towards the edges. Not only does the physical footprint of the bar style LED lights reach from edge to edge, you can see in these maps it creates a more even distribution of ppfd, which again is usable light. As with all products, there are expensive lights, affordable lights, and lights that are so cheap you should really question their effectiveness. Fortunately for us, there is a good handful of companies in the middle tier price range. These are ideal for the hobbyist cannabis grower, and the following companies I kind of classify as being in that middle tier, and they all make cannabis specific grow lights, so that's a plus. There's AC Infinity, Spider Farmer, Mars Hydro, Vivo Sun, HLG, and a couple others. In the old days of indoor growing, one of the most common answers to any grow problem was add more light. But now, with all of the advancements in technology, can there be such a thing as too much light? Can being overpowered actually hurt my plants? Well, the answer is yes, and in more than one way. Number one, heat. The higher the wattage, the higher the heat signature. HID systems are less efficient than LED lights and convert a lot of their wattage into heat. Higher wattage HID lights can create temperatures in the grow tent that are above the optimal level for growth. The efficiency of LED lights gives them a lower heat signature at the canopy level, which is beneficial. Number two, bleaching. If you place an overly powered grow light very close to your canopy, you can bleach the flower. Not only does this make the finished flower less visually appealing, but you'll also likely be losing some terpenes and cannabinoids, which make up the essence of your effects when consuming the flower. So, not a good idea, right? And finally, number three, reduced growth. When it comes to light intensity and plant growth, there is a point of diminishing returns. And remember, running your light costs money. The more wattage, the more expensive it is to run. Although on the small home scale, the cost difference is typically minimal. Studies have shown that increased growth flatlines around 1500 ppfd, and going past 1850 ppfd can actually bring reduced yields. But keep in mind, these levels are incorporating the use of CO2 and other very specific controlled variables to drive growth at such a high ppfd. The goal for hobbyist cannabis growers during the flowering cycle is usually between 800 ppfd and 1000 ppfd, with my kind of feeling is, the sweet spot is often right around 900 ppfd. That's kind of what I find. But if you stick to the recommendations of wattage per square foot that I previously mentioned, you'll be in good shape to hit the numbers your plants need. You can measure ppfd by using an expensive light meter from Apogee, or you can try an affordable app like Photone. I made the $5 investment for the app, the $25 for the light diffuser that you put on your phone, and guys, it was money well spent. So not only does it tell you the ppfd of any location in your grow, it also calculates DLI, which is really the ultimate number to know when it comes to giving your plants the daily light it needs. But that is a topic for another Westport University video. So let everyone know down in the comments, what light are you using? How many watts is it? And what size of grow tent are you using it in? Help me out, guys. Keep the conversation rolling here. We all learn from each other. So chadwestport.com is where you can go to find my genetics and merch. Thank you for watching here on Chad Westport YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe button. It helps me out if you're not already subscribed yet. There's new Westport University videos coming every week. So thank you for watching today. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And remember, everybody, to party on. Is there such a thing as too many plants in a grow tent? Does it have to be full? Stay tuned for the answers and for the recommended number of plants that fit into the popular grow tent sizes. Grow tents have become incredibly popular among indoor gardeners, and for good reason. They provide a controlled environment, they maximize space, and they offer an incredible amount of flexibility when it comes to climate control and lighting. I remember a time before grow tents were even a product. But one question that always seems to come up nowadays is, how many plants can I actually fit in this thing? And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. A lot of ambitious new growers think that you can cram as many plants as possible into a grow tent and somehow, magically, they'll all thrive. But the truth is, overcrowding can lead to a whole host of problems, from reduced growth rates to increased risk of pests and disease. On the other hand, some new growers think that you need to leave a ton of space between each plant. And from my commercial cannabis experience, I know that these plants can be packed pretty tight if done correctly. So what's the right approach? Another common misconception is that plant spacing is all about the size of the container. Some growers have said, I've got a 5-gallon pot, so I'll leave this much space between each plant. And well, container size does play a factor in the equation, but that's not the whole story. You've got to consider the mature size of the plant, how long it will veg for, its growth habits, plant training, and even the type of lighting that you're using. And even then, it's not always a hard and fast rule. The reality is, plant spacing is a complex topic and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. But that's what makes the topic so fascinating, right? It's like a puzzle, and once you understand the different factors that affect plant spacing, you can start to put the pieces together and create a thriving indoor garden for yourself. So let's explore some of these factors that will affect how many plants you can fit in a grow tent. First and foremost, you've got to consider the size of the plants themselves. Different cannabis genetics will have different growth habits. Some strains grow short and wide, and they have tight internodal spacing. These plants are generically described as having an indica plant morphology. There are also types that grow very tall and have lots of space between the nodes. Generally, these are described as a sativa plant morphology. Expected plant height is something that a good cannabis breeder will always be able to list in the strain description. Use this information to select new seeds based off of your growing environment. You've also got to think about the growth stage of your plant. I mean, I can fit over 40 seedlings in a 4x4 tent, but it won't hold even half of that number if they were flowering. So when considering how many plants to put in the grow tent, calculate that number off of the mature plant sizes. Overcrowding a tent can lead to lower yields through a mechanism called shade avoidance syndrome. When a plant is shorter and it receives less light due to being shaded by the neighboring plants, it will focus its growth energy on growing taller to capture more of the light. And this elongates the plant, it can alter the flowering time, and it will negatively affect the lateral branching. Overcrowding your grow tent also increases the risk of pests and mold problems. With leaves from neighboring plants overlapping, insects have an interconnected highway to move all around your grow space. Having an overly stuffed grow tent also leads to less airflow within the canopy, which creates pockets of moisture and warm air. And these two things can increase the potential for powdery mildew on your crop. However, with good airflow in and around the canopy, along with a regular defoliation schedule, growers can get away with plants packed tighter. In my previous video, I talked about the average yield per plant. If the grower knows the duration of the growth cycle and the yield per plant, they can determine how many plants they need to grow in order to maintain their own supply of cannabis in between harvests. The number of plants they need to grow will dictate the size of the grow tent they will need. So, generically speaking, these are the plant count recommendations for the most commonly used grow tent sizes. As a personal note from experience, a new grower might think that a smaller 2x2 tent would be easier to manage. But truth be told, it's a challenge to control the environmental conditions in that small of a space. They heat up quicker from the light source, they cool off more when the light goes off, and humidity levels can rise quickly, especially after watering your soil. I personally recommend a 4x4 grow tent to avoid the hassle of needing constant environmental adjustments. And even if a 4x4 tent will hold more plants than you think you'll grow, it's always nice to have the ability to add another plant to your garden without needing to buy more grow equipment or another tent. Probably the biggest factor aside from genetics would be the amount of time a grower is going to keep the plant in the vegetative cycle. This is where photoperiod cannabis and autoflower cannabis differ. Autoflower varieties flower on their own schedule and do not need the grower to change the light schedule. Because of this, you can generally fit a few more autoflowers in your tent. If you're growing a number of different strains in the grow tent, consider that the different genetics may have varying space requirements, which is another good reason to check the strain description from the breeder before purchasing your seeds. A good breeder will always have a description for each strain they offer. If you're like me and enjoy having a number of strains on hand, keeping a shorter vegetative cycle will allow growers to put more plants in a single tent. More plants means a shorter vegetative time and a smaller individual yield per plant. The opposite would be fewer plants and a longer vegetative time. But ultimately, that will get you more yield per plant. If you have found your favorite strain and are less focused on growing variety, fewer but larger plants may be the way to go for you. One thing to consider with longer vegetative times, though, is that you will need to use larger containers, and you will also need to keep the nutritional needs of that plant in check for longer, which is something for new growers to consider. Now, some of you might be thinking, why would I veg for less time if I'm going to get less yields? And that's a valid question. But variety is one reason. And as an experienced grower, I know that if we look at total yield on an annual basis, these numbers come out roughly even, as you can see in this chart. Plant training also matters. As a new grower, you may not be experimenting yet with training techniques like sea of green or screen of green, and that is okay. However, I can fit 50 sea of green trained plants in a 4x4 tent, or I could use the screen of green method and fill a 4x4 tent with just one plant. We'll cover these techniques and more in a future Westport University video. Ultimately, the key is to find a balance between maximizing space and giving your plants the room they need to thrive. It's not about cramming as many plants as possible into your grow tent, but about creating a harmonious and productive growing environment. Putting too many plants in the tent can lead to some negative consequences, but with planning, those dangers can be mitigated. On the other hand, underplanting won't harm your plants, but it might lead to wasted space and energy. To sum it all up, knowing how many plants you can fit in a grow tent is crucial for successful indoor gardening. It's not just about throwing a bunch of plants in a tent and hoping for the best. By considering the factors we discussed today and using a little creativity and experimentation, you can create a thriving grow tent that will produce amazing results. So what's your experience been like with grow tents? Have you ever tried to fit too many plants in a small space? Or do you have any tips for maximizing space in your grow tent? Leave your comments below. And be sure to check out our next Westport University video for even more tips and tricks for indoor gardening. ChadWestport.com is the website to find my gear and merch, and please subscribe to the Chad Westport channel here on YouTube. Thank you for tuning in, and remember everybody to party on! Join me as I explain the factors that will influence your harvests and determine the answer to the question, how much weed can one plant yield? Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. When it comes to growing cannabis, one of the first questions on every grower's mind is how much usable flower they can actually yield from a single plant. Many people have seen pictures of those giant outdoor plants and wonder if that is what every plant will grow like. I'm sorry to say, the answer is no. Overall yield matters most to commercial growers, but it also matters to home growers, particularly medical growers who want the most out of their garden. After all, who wants to rely on commercially grown cannabis as their medicine? A large reason to grow at home is because you control the inputs and you control the quality. Cannabis yield is incredibly variable, and it's influenced by a number of factors. Strain selection, growing conditions, and cultivation methods all play a critical role in determining how much bud you'll ultimately get from your plant. Take two identical plants, for example, and grow one of those with LED lights indoors. Now, grow the other one outdoors in a sunny climate. You can bet your bottom dollar that the outdoor plant will produce a significantly different yield than the indoor plant. Different strains of cannabis also have unique characteristics that affect their yield. Some strains are bred specifically for high-yielding potential, while others are better suited for their potency or unique flavor profiles. Then, you have factors like climate, soil quality, and nutrient availability, all of which can impact the final harvest. It's a complex interplay of variables, but with observation and experience, you'll be able to master them. Because of the many factors, it's not uncommon for growers to have different yields from one garden to the next. One grower may do everything perfect, while another grower has a few hiccups. Yields will vary between different growers, even for the same strain. But breeders should be able to provide growers with the expected yields. But I'll tell you, when they do so, they're often assuming optimal conditions. When it comes to yield, plant genetics are crucial. Certain strains are naturally more productive than others thanks to their unique genetic makeup. But genetics are only part of the overall equation. Light exposure is also critical, as cannabis plants need sufficient light to undergo photosynthesis and produce growth energy. In indoor grows, this typically means using high-powered LED lights, while outdoor growers need to ensure that their plants are getting enough light hours in the winter months. There are a number of important factors to know about lighting, and I'll cover that in another video. Luckily for home growers, there are many cannabis-specific LED lights available at an affordable price that offer the right spectrum and output. I personally use Spider Farmer. Nutrient availability is another key factor in cannabis yield. Plants need access to essential micronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in order to thrive. A lack of these nutrients can severely impact your yield, leading to stunted growth and reduced flower production. The catch here is too much of those nutrients can also lead to poor growth. Many synthetic nutrient lines come with dosage recommendations. Fortunately, for new growers, this takes a lot of the guesswork out of applying nutrients in the proper ratios and at the right time. I like to use organic amendments from Kiss Organics, and I can sprinkle them on top of my soil and then add water to move them into the root zone. Pretty easy stuff. Growing techniques also play a role, with methods like pruning and topping able to increase yields by promoting more bud sites for flower development. The amount of vegetative time you give the plant will also significantly increase your yield. The longer the plant is in the vegetative stage, the larger it grows, and the more bud sites it will have when you flip the plant into the flowering cycle. The longer you veg for, the larger of a pot size you will need, so keep that in mind. There's an old saying out there, the bigger the roots, the bigger the fruits. Watering is something that most new growers have a hard time mastering. The roots need a constant balance of air and water, and when this gets out of balance, it can affect the growth significantly. Even outside of the optimal parameters of lighting, temperature, nutrients, and watering, growers will most often be able to successfully harvest some buds from their plants. But it's when you get all of these things working together that you really start to see your yields truly explode. Under optimal conditions, a single cannabis plant can produce a staggering amount of weed. We're talking multiple ounces, even pounds of high quality flower, perfect for smoking, vaping, or cooking. So how can you get to your harvest goals? Well, for starters, you need a top shelf strain that's bred for high yields. You'll also need a climate controlled indoor grow space with advanced lighting, as well as a nutrient-rich soil that has been calibrated for maximum growth. A few high-producing strains that you might be interested in are Hash Plant, Afghani No. 1, Big Buddha Cheese, Westport Grape Juice, and Blue Dream. And a few low-yielding but very popular strains include Skittles, Purple Urkel, and RS11, and the RS stands for Rainbow Sherbet, Rainbow Sherbet 11. It's important to have realistic expectations when you start. Hopefully you'll have some beginner's luck, but likely you may struggle in one or two of these areas I mentioned at different times during your first few grows. And that's okay. The good news is that even a stunted plant still produces buds, just not as much. So for beginners, let's assume that they are growing a plant in soil with plenty of room and light to grow. If growers are using a photoperiod variety cannabis plant and they keep that plant in the vegetative stage for 30 days by keeping the light cycle at 18 hours on and 6 hours off, new growers will generally get about 2 to 3 ounces of dried cannabis flowers per plant. Experienced growers will often harvest 5 to 8 ounces per plant in the same scenario. It's worth mentioning the difference between wet weight and dry weight. When the plants are freshly harvested, they still contain a lot of water in the tissues. As the plants begin drying, you will notice the buds getting smaller. That is natural. The wet weight refers to the weight of the buds at harvest. The wet weight is usually 2 to 3 times what your dry weight will actually be. And for reference, when most people are talking about yields, they are talking about their dry weight. By growing the same genetics a number of times, you'll be able to better predict your future yields. You'll also become more familiar with that particular strain, and if you are observant and keep notes, you'll likely grow it better each time, steadily increasing your yields. Knowing how much an average cannabis plant will yield allows growers to determine the number of plants they will need to grow to fulfill their personal needs in between harvests. If indoor growers decide to keep a cannabis plant in the vegetative stage for longer to increase the plant size, when that plant is flowered by changing the light schedule to 12 hours off and 12 hours on, it will yield significantly more cannabis flower than the same plant in the vegetative stage for only half of that time. The more branches and nodes a plant has, the more bud size it will also have. Photoperiod varieties can often yield more dried cannabis than autoflower varieties because autoflower varieties, they're not dependent on the amount of light hours to begin flowering. They typically do so about 3 to 4 weeks after germination. Now, my main reason for discouraging new growers from starting with autoflowers is that they do not give you time to recover the plant back to health before the flowering starts if mistakes are made early. And early mistakes will significantly reduce the yield. I'll go more in depth on the differences between photoperiod and autoflower varieties in another Westport University video. Monster plants like this don't just naturally happen because you are growing under the sun. They take carefully amended soil with plenty of nutrients, and they require plenty of support for their many heavy limbs. But with the right soil and the right conditions, you can grow plants large enough to have a picnic under. So in conclusion, cannabis yield is a complex and multifaceted phenomenon that's influenced by a wide range of factors. By understanding the critical role of strain selection, growing conditions, and cultivation methods, you can maximize your yields and reap bountiful harvests from your hard work. Now, you should have a benchmark as for what to expect from each cannabis plant you successfully harvest. Thank you for watching, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about average yields in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out my other videos. I'll be posting new Westport University videos each week. Stop by chadwestport.com to pick up gear and merch, and remember everybody, to party on! In this video, I'm not just going to tell you if it works or doesn't work. We're getting into the science, the gear, time schedules, and the big question of if you've been missing out on quality and yield this entire time. Nobody likes airy, larvae buds, not to smoke them and definitely not to trim them. Larvae feels like such a waste of your time and of your plant's potential. Trimming that stuff is the only time I actually curse at this plant. Now, most indoor growers remove the lower branches so that they don't have to deal with the weak and larvae buds later. But today, there is cannabis underlighting technology, which has promised to change all of that with claims of 30 to 40% greater yields. But what's really going on here? Why your lower canopy is dying on the vine. So before we fix the problem, let's get on the same page about why it's happening. It all comes down to the simple fact that light is energy. And for a cannabis plant, light is life. Your main light, whether it's an HPS or LED, it does a great job of blasting the top of your canopy with all the energy it needs. But light intensity drops off quickly based on your distance from the light source. It's called the inverse square law. By the time overhead light struggles down through the top fan leaves to the bottom third of your plant, it's basically living in the dark down there. Those lower branches and bud sites just aren't getting enough juice to do their job at full capacity. The result is what we all hate. Popcorn buds. Small, loose, and totally lacking the density and bag appeal of the upper buds. For years, the advice was just to lollipop your plants. Basically, strip off all of that lower growth in late veg and then again in early flower so that the plant doesn't waste energy on it. Now, under canopy lighting is reportedly changing the whole game. Instead of trimming that growth away, the idea is to power it up with light. How underlighting wakes up your plants. The way that this works is surprisingly simple, but remember, under canopy lighting is supplemental. You're not replacing your top light, you're adding to it. And this method works by placing fixtures below the canopy, shining upwards. The light illuminates all of those lower bud sites that, until now, have been living in the shadows. A common question that I get is, can the bottom leaves even use light? And the answer is yes. While the top side is way more efficient than the underside is perfectly capable of photosynthesis. When you shine a light from below, you're basically turning on a whole set of dormant solar panels all over your plant. Those lower leaves that were just draining energy suddenly start fueling better growth in the bottom half of the plant. This isn't just bro science, it's backed up by real data, but I will say there isn't a mountain of documentation, particularly when it comes to cannabis. So aside from white papers that are funded by lighting companies, the most frequently quoted research paper on the topic seems to be the 2018 paper titled Improving Cannabis Bud Quality and Yield with Subcanopy Lighting. The research was conducted by a university in Canada, and the lead name on the paper is Dave Hawley, PhD. Dave Hawley now works for Fluence Lighting Company, one of the leaders in under canopy lighting equipment. Coincidence? Chicken before the egg? Who knows? But we can skip to the good parts in the study here, which I've already highlighted. Now, the name of the paper is, again, Improving Cannabis Bud Quality and Yield with Subcanopy Lighting. This study found some interesting results of how this additional lighting influences secondary metabolites, such as cannabinoids and terpenes. It definitely produced an impact, and I'll link the study in the show notes for you to discover that on your own. As it says in the highlighted text, the objective of this study was to evaluate bud yield as well as cannabinoid and terpene contents when plants were grown with no SCL, aka subcanopy lighting, red-blue SCL, or RGB, which is red, green, blue SCL. The next highlighted section points out that the control group without the under canopy lighting received less overall ppfd, so less usable light. But that shouldn't come as a surprise. This next yellow section reads that the disproportionate increase in yield via SCL may be explained by improved light distribution and penetration into the lower canopy than what would be available by simply increasing overhead ppfd. Essentially, that is saying, if you added 100 watts of light above the canopy, it wouldn't have the same benefit on the under canopy buds as 100 watts added as sub-canopy lighting. It goes on to say that the lower leaves with reduced photosynthesis from low levels of light penetration start to perform better when exposed to the much closer under canopy lighting source. They did this test for 2 runs, and the next yellow section points out a few differences between the 2 runs that may have influenced the outcome. And this is an excellent example of why what we read in studies doesn't always translate to us in our grow environments. There are always fluctuation of parameters in our gardens, and conditions aren't commonly identical run after run after run. But I digress. The remaining highlights are interesting notes about the results, specifically between the secondary metabolite levels of the upper canopy versus the lower canopy when SCL is involved. But let's skip to the conclusion section. It says, the results suggest that supplemental SCL can increase bud yield and modify cannabis and terpene profiles. The increase in bud yield is likely a product of greater PPFD compared with production using overhead lighting alone. So again, all of this research, aside from the secondary metabolic findings, is saying that if we add more light, we get a better yield. Duh. Hey, if you're finding this useful, do me a quick favor and please hit the subscribe or share button. Really helps the channel out and it tells YouTube that you're digging the content. It's free and it means a ton to me. So, okay, let's get into the gear that you'll need. Your underlighting shopping list. If you're thinking you may want to give this a shot, the following is what you should be looking for. Many of the new LED single strip lights are perfect for this. They're super efficient, they run cool, and they're slim. Now, you'll want to buy an LED. You absolutely should not stick a hot HPS or metal halide bulb under your plants in a grow tent. You will torch them, and guys, you're creating a fire hazard. Don't do it. So, LEDs are what make underlighting safe and practical for us home growers. Get an LED. Second though, and this is non-negotiable, they have to be waterproof. Your tent is a humid place. You're watering, there's condensation. The last thing you want is an electrical fire. So look for lights with at least an IP65 rating. That means they're sealed up tight and safe from water. Don't skip this step. Third, think about the light spectrum. The simplest and safest bet is a full spectrum or broad spectrum white light. This gives the lower canopy the same kind of light spectrum that the top is getting. So there are a few studies like the one I mentioned earlier that look at different combinations, including blue-red and blue-green-red, but using a full spectrum LED light bar is a more reliable choice, especially when you're starting out. A step-by-step installation guide. The most common way for small tent growers to use under canopy lighting is to simply lay the light bars on the floor or on the lip of the pots. Now, most of these lights are built slim, so they fit between your plants no matter how crowded they are without any issue. Y'all have seen my tents. So, another thing you could do is you could also hang them using ratchet ropes, or you could create small light stands like the ones used for under canopy lighting in commercial grows. One thing that home growers may notice is that the cord on the LED strips is too short if you've correctly placed your power strip up high off of the ground. You can get around that though. But another hindrance can be that with the added underlighting bars, all of the slots on your power strip are now full. And with all of these cords, please take a minute to manage your cables. Keep the wires tidy, keep them up off the floor, and keep them away from where you water. Make sure you don't trip on them or snag them. Make sure all the connections are solid. Every grower should want a clean setup that's safe and easy to work around. The goal with this lighting is to get nice, even coverage on the whole underside of the canopy. If you have a few bars, space them out. Keep the lights at least 3 inches or about 7.5 centimeters away from any part of the plant. Even though LEDs run cool, they can still bleach or burn leaves, and the buds too if the light intensity is high enough. When and how much? I get these questions a lot. When do I turn my underlighting on, and how bright or powerful should they be? Well, don't use underlighting on seedlings or young vegging plants. They're programmed to stretch upward towards one light source, and lighting from below can confuse them and cause some pretty weird growth. The perfect time to switch on your underlights is at the start of the 3rd week of flower. The big initial stretch phase is mostly over. The plant structure is essentially set, and the bud sites are just starting to form. That's when you want to start feeding your plants that extra light from below. However, there are some growers who use under canopy lighting in the veg cycle as well. Now for intensity. The common wattages for under canopy lighting are 100 watts or 120 watt light fixtures. Don't blast your plants with 100% power on the first day. That's a recipe for stress. Start low. For the first few days to a week, run the lights at about 25 or 30% power. Just watch your plants. If they look happy, no curling, no bleaching, no stress, you could start bumping the light intensity up by about 10% every other day. The goal is to get to full power over a week or two. This kind of lets your plants ease into its new high energy environment. And if your lights don't actually have dimmers on them, you can use distance as a way of controlling the intensity they're receiving. Managing your new high performance grow. Putting in under canopy lighting isn't a set it and forget it type of deal. By adding the additional light, you've just supercharged your grow, so you need to adjust a few things to keep up with the new demands. First off, your plants are going to get thirsty and hungry quicker. More light means more photosynthesis, which means a faster metabolism. So keep a close eye out for any nutrient issues and be ready to feed them a little more to keep up with their new appetite. Second, you're adding more light and growing more plant matter, which means an increase in trapped heat and humidity. So good airflow is now more important than ever to stop mold from taking hold. You might need to add a small fan pointed at the lower canopy and crank up your exhaust fan a bit to keep the air moving. I recommend monitoring temperature below the canopy as well as above the canopy in an effort to detect and avoid microclimates within your grow tent. So temperature and humidity, keep an eye on those. And finally, you get to change how you prune. With underlights, you don't need to do that crazy aggressive lollipopping anymore. You don't have to strip the whole bottom of the plant bare. You'll still want to do some strategic defoliation, tucking, or removing a few big fan leaves here and there that maybe are directly blocking light from a nice looking bug site. But you no longer need to remove entire branches unless you need better airflow. My conclusion. So, is under canopy lighting actually worth it for commercial growers? Yeah, it can be. With more light, you can add biomass to flowers. Under canopy lighting can turn B buds on the bottom into A buds. And if you aren't familiar, these are grades given to the visual appearance and density of buds that are destined for the retail market. So A buds get top dollar, while B buds might fetch only 30% of the A buds price, if at all. And commercial growers are financially motivated, and the reported returns so far have outpaced the cost to run the underlighting. So, to be continued. But it looks so far pretty good for them. But my years of agricultural experience flashes back about a decade ago to the vertical farming model that was set to revolutionize indoor agriculture. Billions of dollars were invested, but vertical farming was greatly derailed by microclimates created by the vertical design. So by having lights at multiple levels in the cultivation space, additional resources like air conditioning and dehumidifiers were needed to maintain the proper growing environment at each level. But guys, we're not commercial growers or traditional agriculture. We're home growers. Personally, I did see an increase in the size of my lower buds when I used this style of lighting. But the additional yield wasn't mind-blowing. It quickly became a pain for me to try and maneuver around the light strips between the plants when I needed to water or defoliate the back of the tent. The additional light was also pretty blinding because when you're working in your tent, because the light is aimed upwards, it's always shining right in your eyes. And in the end, I produce enough flower to get me by, so I didn't continue using the underlighting. Now I want to hear from you. Have you tried under canopy lighting? What were your results? What size of tent are you in? Are you thinking about adding under canopy lighting? Drop your questions, your experiences, and your results in the comments. Let's help each other dial in our grows, guys. You can find my gear and merch at chadwestport.com. Keep it locked here on Chad Westport YouTube channel. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next Westport University video. But more importantly, everybody, please remember to party on. Today, we're calculating power bills to figure out exactly how much it costs for us to grow this plant. A couple weeks ago, I put out a video about light hanging height in regards to canopy, in regards to plant stretching, and DLI. Well, here, actually, listen to what I said. If I'm giving my early veg plants 300 ppfd, what is the difference between 300 ppfd from 12 inches away compared to 300 ppfd from 36 inches away? Is it light distance or the light intensity that keeps the plant from stretching? And it's a question that a lot of you commented on in the comment section, which was good because I put that question out there to get you thinking. Now, one of the things that I did see in the comment section was more than a couple people say, but man, your power bill is going to be so much higher. You're going to be wasting so much money and so much energy if you ran it higher on a higher setting versus lower dimmed down, even if you're getting the same DLI or the same PPFD at canopy level. Now, I applaud that. That is critical thinking. That is looking beyond the obvious. So, excellent. I am glad you brought that up. But I kind of already knew the answer to that question. And I could have told you then. I could tell you right now. But the internet being the internet, it's going to say prove it. And so today, this little device is going to prove it for you. And actually, since I'm in there, we're going to go through all of the pieces in your grow tent, from your circulating fan to your exhaust fan to the grow lights, and see exactly how much wattage it's using, how much it's costing you, and how you can calculate your power bill based off the grow equipment you have for every month. So let's get into it. I should probably start by explaining this little device. So basically, take it, plug it into your power source, and as you can see, it already comes to life. Now, there's a variety of functions on here, but the second key here, this is cost. This will actually help you calculate what your power bill will be running the device. So I've looked at my power bill. I'll show you how to look at your power bill here to calculate and get the number to add in for cost. Grab your most recent power bill, go to the back where they explain your charges for the month. Mine says current service detail. Power's not cheap. But anyways, right here you can see what it is charging me per kilowatt hour. So 0.0911. So essentially 9 cents per kilowatt hour is what I'm getting charged. And now you know what your cost is. You've got it calculated. I've got mine entered in. This is the function key. It will flip me through the different screens. This one, again, it's going to calculate the amount of time it's been running, the current wattage it is using, and then the kilowatt per hour cost of the device here. If I flip to the next screen, it's going to give me how many kilowatt hours, kWh, kilowatt hours have accrued during that time, and it will give me, I could leave this running for days on end and it will tell me what day it's calculating there. Next screen, voltage, it's 120 volts, good deal. Amps, the low wattage, so things will kind of fluctuate. It's not exactly just a static number, so that will give you the low number. Flip to the next screen, this will give you the high number, and we'll see exactly how much variance there is on these different devices through this experiment. Then I flip it, that'll tell me what the overload is. Again, that 9 cents, that's my cost per kilowatt hour here. And then back to the main screen where I'll stay, which is the wattage, cost, and time. All right, let's start with our 6-inch oscillating fan. We'll see exactly how much wattage this is drawing. We'll be able to run it for a particular duration of time, and that's actually going to help us calculate our costs. So first thing we got to do
is take this and plug it into here. But before I do that, in your mind, how much wattage do you think your 6-inch oscillating fan is actually drawing? Because I think this number will surprise you, but we'll go ahead and plug this in here. Now, my fan, it has 10 speeds on it. Right now it's off, but you know, all devices typically will have a little bit of draw from it. But let me go ahead and turn this on to level 1. So level 1 of 10, and that's pulling about half a watt on level 1. Now in my grow tents, I typically am running these on 3 or 4. So let me go ahead and turn this up to level 3. If it were to be on level 3, I'm only using 1 watt draw from the wall. Now again, as time goes by, that 1 watt adds up. It will get to kilowatt hours, and then that kilowatt hours we can convert into a cost. But we'll let this run for a while. I want to go through the different speeds here again, because 1 watt, that's kind of surprising to me. I don't know if it's surprising to you, but let's go up level 5 here. Now this is level 5 of 10. It's at 1.8 watts, but I'm going to turn on the oscillation feature. And by turning on the oscillation feature, you can see that caused the wattage to go up. So at level 5 with oscillation, we're still only at about 4.5 watt power draw from the wall. Very minimal, but let's max this thing out. Let's go all the way to 10. Let's keep it oscillating and see what it's drawing. It's drawing about 8.2 watts. Hardly anything. Again, for full oscillation and full power, we're going to let it run for a little bit longer, and then we'll calculate the cost for the 6-inch oscillating fan. So this 6-inch oscillating clip fan has been running for nearly an hour. It is plugged into my cool little meter here, and as you can see, it's currently pulling 7.6 watts from the wall, 59 minutes, 31 seconds. But let's just check the highs and the lows here. So we go to the low. Well, we don't need that. The high, 8.3. That's where we left it. But it seems to have come down to about 7.5 and averaged that for the last little while. So to find out how much this is actually going to cost us, again, this is full speed, full oscillation, and we're at the 1 hour mark. Now it says it's costing me 0 cents, but it's got to cost me something. So let's see how many kilowatt hours this is used. It's used 0.007 kilowatt hours, and I'm paying 9 cents per kilowatt hour. So whatever that is of 9 cents, that's what we just paid to run this clip fan. And next up will be our 6-inch inline fan. This is a piece of gear that growing in tents, you cannot get away without having an exhaust fan. So this is something that everybody uses. 6-inch is the most common size. So again, it's good to test it and see what wattage it actually pulls. And just like that fan before this one, place your bets on how much wattage this will take. We're gonna go ahead and plug this in here. Okay, so with the power off, you can see it's drawing about 1.5, 1.6 watts. Turning this up to level 1, it's drawing 3 watts, level 2. I'm drawing about 6 watts by running it on level 2. But like I said, this goes all the way to 10, so what's the fun of not pushing it? Level 5, here we go. Let's increase the speed to level 5. And you can see the wattage increasing. You also hear the sound increasing, but level 5, we're looking at about 25 watts from this 6-inch exhaust inline fan. But let's put it all the way up, number 10. You'll hear the sound start to increase. But as it gets all the way up to the top, it is pulling, it's pulling about 61 watts when it's set to 10. Honestly, if you are running your exhaust fan at 10 out of 10, 24 hours a day, you need to upgrade your inline fan to something larger that's going to move more air. So
I'm gonna go ahead and get this plugged in here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna run the exhaust fan at 5 because I only ever really run it at 2 or 3. So 5 is going to be more than I will actually be paying, but it's also gonna give you guys a good idea of what to expect. Because again, 5 is the middle point. We'll double it to figure out how much it would cost to run maximum the full time. And at a level 5, we're pulling about 25 watts from the wall right now. All right, we are coming to a noisy end for our 6-inch inline fan. As you can see here, we are right at the minute mark, or sorry, the 1 hour mark, and it's still hanging out at that 24 watts from the wall. I'm actually gonna come over here and turn this down real quick, down to 2, which is the level that I normally run it at. So the wattage that you're seeing here is the actual wattage I would be used to using, and that's, well, that's only pulling 6 watts from the wall. But again, after an hour running this at speed number 5, which is half of the power, it used 0.024 kilowatt hours. So, and for the one you have all been waiting for, the grow light. We are going to find out what your cost difference is running this thing at 40% or 100%. You seem to think it will be miles apart in price. We're gonna find out. Now right now the light is off. We're gonna turn this on. Minimum, it starts at 11%. So what is 11%? What does it say there on the screen? It says 40 watts. Now, let's cut to the chase. Let's go up to 50%. 50%. This light is drawing 165 watts from the wall at 50%. So if we go to 100, presumably that's going to be roughly 330 watts. So let's find out. Let's go up to 100%. There we go. 100%. This light is drawing 326 watts roughly. Now, what is the price difference of drawing 326 watts or 160 watts? Let's find out. I'm going to start off. I've reset the timer to 0, plug the light in here, turn it up to 50%. And then I'm going to let it run for an hour, and we'll come back and look at the data. Again, it's at that 165, 50%. All right, as you can see, we are still at 50% here. I'm going to zoom in on this. All right, so there we are. So we're coming up on the 1 hour mark. We're still at 163 watts. Let's go through at this hour mark and take a look at some of the data we were able to get. So in that hour, we did a 0.163 kilowatt hours. That's what we will be charged. Flip through, that's the voltage, that's the amperage. This was the low wattage, that's not even turned on, and then the high wattage, so 165.3, never got above that. And again, not much fluctuation there. So we go back to the main screen. We had 1 hour, it's at 163 watts right now, but what is our total cost? Our total cost is 1 cent. 1 cent. So at 100%, running this light higher, running it higher, turning the knob, is it really going to cost that much more to get the better coverage from the light? We'll find out. Let's do another test. Boom. All right, back to 0, kilowatt hours, back to 0. So let me turn this up to 100%.
As you can see, this went up as well. It is now drawing 323, 324 watts. We'll be able to check the high and the low, but there you are, 100%. I'm going to come back in an hour. We'll look at the same data. As you can see here, we're still at 100%, and on here we are coming up to the hour 59 up to 60. Okay, so we're currently at 319 watts. We'll go ahead and check the highs and the lows for that, but again, we're at the 1 hour mark, so let's see. We used 0.320 kilowatt hours, which at 50% for 1 hour, it was 0.16. So it really did 50% to 100%. Kilowatt hours, it doubled. So that's accurate. It remained the same. Voltage, amperage, the watt low, 163. That's from when we had it at 50% and started it out there. But we brought it up to 100, and the high point was 324 watts. So that was the maximum it drew during that 1 hour period. But again, we're currently at 319 watt draw from the wall. We're an hour into it, and for that 1 hour, it cost me 2 cents. So to settle that argument of running your light higher and running it at a higher percentage compared to lower to the canopy and a lower percentage, well, it's going to save you a single penny, and I don't think that's unreasonable. Those numbers appear to be very low, lower than probably most of you expected. But let's take a look at what the things cost on a monthly basis. Here's the monthly cost for running my 6-inch circulating fan 24 hours a day at the highest speed. In 1 hour, 0.007 kilowatt hours was used. In a day, that's 0.168 kilowatt hours. Times the national average of 20 cents per kilowatt hour comes to 3 cents per day, or a total of $1.01 per month. Next up, we have the monthly cost of running my 6-inch exhaust fan. And again, this was run at the middle speed at number 5 and calculated for 24 hours a day. At 1 hour, it was 0.024 kilowatt hours. 1 day total was 0.576 kilowatt hours. It's a total of 12 cents per day and cost me $3.46 per month to run that exhaust fan. The light at 50% for 1 hour, it was 0.163 kilowatt hours. And over an 18-hour day, we're assuming veg here, that's 2.934 kilowatt hours used. Comes to a total of 59 cents per day, or monthly, it's $17.70. We'll compare that with the light at 100%. In 1 hour, it was 0.321 kilowatt hours. In that 18-hour veg cycle day, it was 5.778 kilowatt hours. And that was $1.16 per day, or $34.80 per month, which came to a difference of $17.10 running at 100 compared to 50% for the 18 hours. I also wanted to look at the flowering schedule, which is 12 hours. So here again, at 50%, we have the same kilowatt per hour, but at 12 hours, 1.956, which came to 39 cents per day, or $11.70 per month to run that grow light at 50% for 12 hours. Compared to the 100% for the 12-hour flowering cycle, that was 3.852 kilowatt hours, which came out to 77 cents per day, or $23.10 per month to run that light for 12 hours a day at 100%, which was a difference of $11.40 per month compared to 50% at 12 hours. So there you have it. That is some hard facts, some data you can work with to determine the cost of your own grow room. Now, the price difference between running the light higher versus closer to the canopy, personally, I feel it's worth it in the long run for the increased yield because of the better light coverage. But
Let me know if you think it's worth it down in the comments. ChadWestport.com is where you could go to find my genetics and merch. Keep it locked right here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel. I'd appreciate it if you subscribed if you already haven't. That really helps me out. And thank you for watching. I hope that has helped you. And above all, guys, remember to party on. I recently made a video on why I like to lollipop, and from that I got a lot of comments of like, can you show me how you lollipop? So that's what I'm here to do today. And one thing you have to take into account when it comes to lollipopping is, what are you growing for? I like to grow for flower, and a lot of that lower larvae stuff isn't worth my time to trim. It's very small, it's all leaf, it's frustrating, nobody likes it. But if you are growing for concentrates, that stuff still grows trichomes, and that's really what you're after with the concentrate. So depending upon your growing style may influence whether you like to lollipop or not. But I like to lollipop, so let's get into my reasoning for what to take, what to keep, and how to approach the entire process. The only tool you're gonna need are your trusty pair of scissors. And if you are taking clones, now is a perfect time. I will literally be taking dozens of clones off of this plant and tossing them away. But if you want to make clones or just practice cloning, what have you got to lose if you're throwing it away anyways? Lollipopping is the perfect time to master your cloning. One of the principles behind lollipopping is trying to ensure that all of the bud sites are getting enough light to be used efficiently. Now, we all know a plant will stretch when it goes into flowering, and that's why it helps to be familiar with your plant before lollipopping. This one I've grown before, and I know it's going to grow about 10 inches during the stretch phase. Now, why that matters is because we want to space our LEDs or our lights, whichever system you're using, at a certain distance above the canopy. And if I know this is going to stretch another 10 inches, well, that means everything down here is going to be 2 feet away from the light. And that's usually about where the penetration really stops being effective. So everything below this, even though it's not 24 inches at the moment, it will be after stretch. So everything kind of below this point is what I'm going to be taking off. Now I'll go in and show you exactly which ones and why. Okay, so very quickly we can see little things like this are not going to reach the height that we need to get sufficient light. But do we take the whole branch? Let's see. Nope, it's attached to this big one. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take it off. And like I said, you know, if you guys want to make clones, perfect time. And I'm going to take off some other little ones, like this one right here. See this one? Whoop, never going to reach the top. So let's take it off. Pretty simple. How about this one? You can usually work your way up the stem until you get to the point of something that's going to make sense. So let me do that here. All right, I've reached a point where, you know, this right here, gosh, this is almost at the point that I want to start keeping it. And I kind of look above to see if there's, you know, heavy branching, a lot of bud sites, something that may shade it when it comes to something that's right at the borderline. And for this one, I think I'm just going to leave it on there. So we'll stick with this one. This one, same thing. The side comes out up to here, so it's right at the level. So technically, this branch, oh, nope, I missed one. See, there's one hanging out here on the inside with all of its other little friends. Take you off. All right, so this branch right here now, this is lollipopped, but a lot more to do. I started to clear this branch here, and then as I was working my way towards the top, I looked at the top, and now this is below the level that I'm going to want. It is not going to stretch and keep up. It is going to be extremely shaded. So I'm just going to take this entire
branch off. It is possible to take a branch this big without causing a super amount of stress. Sharp scissors, make sure your plants are healthy, and that's another thing. Make sure they're watered, well fed, and in good condition before you begin lollipopping. Starting to look like a different plant already, huh? As you can see, this cleaned up pretty darn quickly. Now, just because you got the lower stuff cleared off already doesn't mean there isn't stuff still in this middle inside section. And again, this is where it helps to increase airflow. But I don't know if you can see it or not, but if I go in here, I can grab a little branch that is buried underneath all of this. It will never see good light. So again, I'm going in the middle and I'm cleaning some of that stuff out just like we did on the lowers. That's going to increase the airflow, again send some more energy to those upper bud sites that are actually going to get the proper amount of light.
And there you have it. That quick, that simple, a lollipopped plant.
Now there is one more step I would do before I consider the plant ready for flower, and that is the pre-flower defoliation, but we'll cover that in another video. I do want to let y'all know that lollipopping and the defoliation, I like to do that roughly 2 weeks before I flip them to flower. Minimum of a week recovery time. Now you may say, ooh, you took off a lot, and I absolutely did. But if your plant is healthy, it will be able to handle this. Now, this is something that I recommend for regular photo period or feminized seeds. This isn't something that I would recommend you do on an auto flowering variety. I'm Chad Westport. This is how I like to lollipop, and that is how I get her done. So if you guys have any questions, please leave them for me in the comment section. I'll be happy to answer them. Continue to follow me if you already haven't. Chad.Westport on Instagram. Obviously the Chad Westport YouTube channel right here, and the chadwestport.com website. So again, I'd love to hear the questions if you have any, but that's how I lollipop. Thank you for watching, and remember to party on.
People will often ask if I defoliate and flower, and I say yeah, typically about 3 weeks into it. I'm going to show you what that actually looks like. You guys, let's update you on the test tent here, the Spider Farmer 4x4 under the Spider Farmer G8600. And those are some of the new Spider Farmer 6-inch oscillating fans in there. But look at those. Those are the plants I am currently testing. I'm testing out some new strains from other people as well as myself, and it is a jungle in there. So these things need defoliation. They are in the 3rd week of flower, just at the beginning. I typically wait until the end to do another defoliation. But you know what? I want to try to stress these a little bit if I can. Why not, right? Hey, they're testers. So we're going to put them through a little bit of pacing, but really the humidity is building up in here at night, and I need to do some defoliation. That will help reduce the humidity levels in my tent. Let's go in for a closer look. In the front row, we've got one of 3 Hong Kong Fuis. We've got one of the Westport Grape Juice times the Kool-Aid Man right here. And then we got another Westport Grape Juice times the Kool-Aid Man right there. We got 4 of those in there total. Let's check out the next row. All right, moving on back to the second row here, we've got a Hong Kong Fui, then another Hong Kong Fui in the back there. These two are shorter versus the bigger one out here, but the Hong Kong Fui
And then, whoa, way down there, we've got a greenhouse cheese. That thing stays super short and squat, nice and tight nodal spacing. And then another of the Westport grape juice times the Kool-Aid man there. All right, back row time. All right, so in the very back row, we got our last Hong Kong Phooey right here. It too stayed short like its other sister. We've got a Royal Queen Seeds blue cheese right here, which I'm actually excited about. The structure on this one looks really nice. Good stacking, good branch structure. Stoked. We'll see how that goes. And then finally, the last Westport grape juice times the Kool-Aid man back there. Stayed a little bit shorter because it's under the fan. Plants don't like to grow up into the fans. But as you can see there, this garden is full of foliage. It needs to shed a little bit.
And here you go. This is what it's looking like after I've defoliated them, and this is typical of the week 3 defoliation. As you can see to the back of the tent now. You can see that there's going to be good airflow. It's not going to be trapping moisture underneath a dense, thick canopy. So yay, that's that. Let's go in for a closer look. And we'll just pan across again like we did last time, but you can see now lot less leaves. And here we are getting into the back row now, and as you can see, a lot more airspace, but I've left a lot of, the larger leaves on. Basically, I cleaned a lot of the bottom stuff up to, increase the airflow, but I also want to leave some leaves on for photosynthesis. Now, a lot of this garbage here on the bottom, I would normally clean off, but this is the first run and it is a test run, so I want to leave them on because, again, sometimes if you get intersex plants, they don't always completely herm out, but if they're going to throw little balls, they usually do it on the lower branches, and again, it's usually around week 3, which is right now. So again, I don't mind doing the little added stress of defoliation, but I don't really think that's going to flip anything. But I'm leaving those lower branches on because I want to see if any of these have issues. But that is it. That is a peek into my test garden right now, trying out the different things. Got the blue cheese, got the greenhouse cheese, got Hong Kong Phooey times 3, and we got 4 of the Westport grape juice times the Kool-Aid man's in there. And this also gives you a chance to see what it looks like when people say, well, I defoliate at week 3. Well, how much? You can now see. Rewind to the beginning, flash forward to now, you can see the difference. And this is something that I do every run, regular basis, airflow, preventative IPM. It's all good things, folks. Until next time, remember to party on!
"48 hours of darkness before harvest is bad, and today you'll find out why." Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC at WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. You hear a lot of growers talk about giving their plants 48 hours of darkness before harvest. But why is that? The most common answer I get from growers is that they're giving their plants 48 hours of darkness to preserve terpenes. They don't want the hot lights on, burning off all of their terpenes in the final few days. Now, my argument to that has always been, if you're only concerned about terpene preservation in the last 2 days, you don't fully understand how this works. And, I've also heard the argument that you'll save money by not having the lights on. But let's be real. For a home grower, we're talking about saving maybe $5. I've tried this both ways, and I've even played with the length of time that the plants were given in darkness before harvest. And here is why I've come to be against the practice of 48 hours of darkness before harvest. Mainly, I live in a humid climate. Now, let's think about this. When is your tent the coldest, and when is humidity the highest? Well, typically, that's when your lights are off. And when are your buds at their largest, wettest, and most vulnerable to mold? Well, that's right at the end. So by leaving your plant in 48 hours of darkness before harvest, you could be setting the stage for unnecessary problems, and that is why I don't like to do it. Now, concerning 48 hours of darkness before harvest, those are the popular opinions. Those are the common arguments. And, well, I was comfortable accepting those reasons. The logic played out for me. And then, well, new shit has come to light, man. It all started about 2 years ago with something Jeremy Plum said on the Future Cannabis Project, which was hosted by my buddy Damon, aka Industry Sellout.
Val Potheads. Awesome username. Love it. Wants to know what your stance is on 24-hour darkness before harvest.
I'm going to bring my full bias on display here. I'm totally opposed.
What?
If you look with a microscope at trichomes and really observe their behavior, you'll find that, for example, in 24 hours of darkness, you've transformed the relationship to transpiration. Transpiration is connected to turgor, and the internal pressure that is through the phloem and xylem of the irrigated components in the plant. You can watch trichomes do this sagging behavior when transpiration rates change. I am, again, trying to focus on maximum phytochemical inventory in any of the harvesting methods that I use. And a long, long time ago, did a lot of my own observational trials and absolutely do not like darkness.
But wait, there's more! Now, as you may be able to tell, Jeremy is a pretty intelligent dude. Lots of big words there. But before I break this all down, I want to share a little background on Jeremy Plum with you. Now, he's a pretty groovy dude, but he has worked for Are Terpenes, which is a company that leads the industry and pretty much the world in cannabis terpene research and product development. He's also worked alongside pioneering names like this name that you should know, Dr. Ethan Russo. He's consulted for Israeli medical cannabis researchers, which Israel is one of only a few countries that actually do human clinical trials with cannabis. Now, he's also a peer-reviewed and published research author. Again, smart dude. But Jeremy is multi-talented, and he's worked in the lab, and he has also worked in the field. In fact, this footage behind me right now is a video that he took of a research and development field that he has access to. And this is only part of it. And in case you're wondering, this massive field of cannabis is tucked away in a secret location on the east side of my home state. And as you can see, this thing, it just keeps going. And this video goes on for about another 2 minutes. So as you can see, the guy's had access to a little bit of cannabis. Now, at first, I was trying to find research that supported the transpiration rate and trichome formation quandary, but I came up empty-handed. So I reached out to Damon, and there was one study that he pointed me to, but it wasn't super clear. So next, I have been trying to get a moment of time from Jeremy, who is a very, very, very busy person, and a person who doesn't even know me. So what I wanted to get from him is I wanted the deeper answer. I wanted the science. I wanted to know the mechanisms for why this is. And then, good fortunes for me, Damon had him back on the Future Cannabis Project channel recently, and well, shoot, this happened.
My homie Chad Westport has been dying to get your answer from this. 48 hours of darkness before harvest affecting the trichome heads.
I have a perspective. Jesse, do you want to go first? Or can I?
I mean, I guess I've never done any. I don't
Yeah,
have any control to be able to say one way or the other. But
I've had lots of control. And here's one thing that I know.
Y'all ready for this?
Typically, like I've run into this issue in California, as True Terpenes has been working towards all these hemp-derived components. We're experiencing high temperatures and very low vapor pressure deficit in maturity. And as the plant is approaching senescence, unfortunately, I see mass volatilization and losing a lot of character quickly. There's a very small harvest window where you have a chance to still preserve a lot of those volatiles. And I just want to call it that dynamic because I think a lot of people don't realize how much of the soul of the product you're losing in that last moment if there's very high temperatures.
Okay, so he is supporting the original thought that hot lights right above the canopy will lead to terpene loss. But I'll add that this is true whether it is day 30 of flower or the final 2 days of flower.
Aroma matters, have to protect it. It's a struggle. But back to the darkness question, to me, there's a light diet that has to do with intensity, not spectrum. And as you're in senescence, there's a ramping down of intensity that will decrease volatilization.
Okay, so again, he's saying don't run the lights at full strength. Lowering the intensity will reduce the heat, and this action can reduce the volatilization of terpenes.
But if you turn off the light and you go into 48 hours of darkness, you now have an array of hormonal things occurring in the plant that I would argue are not favorable. And I know there's this old school perspective of like, even like cut the plant, let it be in the dark for a lot of time, it gets more potent and all these things. I'd argue really what you want is your net photosynthetic activity to continue until the point of harvest with all this secondary metabolism and subtle enzymatic refinement of aroma components happening right till the end. But you want that to happen in a way that reduces radiant heat, which is going to diminish and volatilize the aromatic inventory and the intensity overall. This last stage is like something you really have to obsess on.
And here comes the science.
I'm thinking of photoperiodism and all the specialized cells that are related to receiving light. And so in the chloroplast, we have these pigments that are picking up the near red and the far red and are creating a signaling system that is like a nervous system to govern the generative growth activities. And that it's called a PRPFR curve. So how much far red light versus near red light is accumulated in those chloroplast cells is essentially what's determining generative versus vegetative growth. And even for 48 hours, think about re-veg. We're telling the plant to go back towards vegetative tissue. 48 hours probably isn't going to make, it's not much time in a plant's perspective, so it's not going to make a massive difference, but it's definitely a signal going in the wrong direction. I don't want I want to continue to tell the plant go towards generative growth. The plant is speaking in light and chemicals and hormones, and so I think the PRPFR curve is going to go the wrong direction at a period where we just want the plant to be focusing on the refinement of the secondary metabolism.
What Jeremy is saying here is that in total darkness, there are hormonal changes within the plant and physical changes of the trichomes that are not favorable. So think about another time in the growth cycle where darkness affects the plants in a significant way. Usually when you flip to flower. And when you flip to flower, you're changing the amount of darkness that the plant receives. As we all know, this causes a major hormonal change within the plant, and that causes it to exit the vegetative stage. So we're trying to find the best methods for the best harvests. And here is what Jeremy recommends.
It depends. One thing I'll say is we see huge diversity. And like I was thinking of dog walker. First times I was able to grow like some really good OGs and dog walkers. One thing that we saw was we got way louder nose and way better output if we had less light intensity. Many other varieties, we had far greater potency with higher light intensity. But to be specific, let's talk a few targets. I think if I was at a facility that had the ability to have 1,000 ppfd for peak maturing, I'd want by the last 2 weeks, initially at that first, 2 weeks before harvest, a reduction by 10%. Another week before harvest, another reduction by 10%. So a staggered drop like that is where roughly as like a cookie cutter approach, I'd recommend, but I want the temperature to go down a little bit and the humidity to go down a little bit in tandem. And typically you have like a 1.2 at peak generative growth, and maybe you're getting closer to like a 0.8.
This is the general concept, okay? Reduce the light intensity towards harvest and keep an eye on humidity. So does Jeremy recommend 48 hours of darkness before harvest?
That's hormonally the wrong direction, phytochemically the wrong direction, in my opinion. Yeah, keep the plant going in the same direction. Don't make a radical change right at the end when wonderful things are happening. I think that's the simplest.
Reduce intensity for the last.
Yeah, reduce intensity, avoid volatilization.
Now, I could have just regurgitated that information and not shown the video and made myself look all smart and stuff, but yo, I wanted you to hear this in technical terms from a very high-level cannabis researcher. It's one thing about the internet is people don't go to the right folks, so believe Jeremy, not me. And has it changed my opinion? No, it's actually reinforced my opinion that 48 hours of dark before harvest can be bad, but for different reasons than I had originally thought. There should be 3 key takeaways from this video. Number 1, it is better to reduce your light intensity and therefore the heat generated from the light in the final 10 to 14 days before harvest in order to minimize terpene loss. And number 2, the plant isn't done metabolizing and creating secondary metabolites 48 hours before harvest. Give your plants the resources they need in order to bring out the maximum expression and its finest potential. You know, playing with its hormones is like playing with big worms' emotions. And number 3, darkness and in turn transpiration, they affect the structure of the trichome head. The trichome heads, those contain all of our cannabinoids and terpenes. So think of the trichome heads as our gold. Quit playing with its process by giving it 48 hours of darkness before harvest. How has your attitude changed now that new stuff has come to light? Find my gear and merch on chadwestport.com and keep it locked here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel for more Westport University videos. But in case you wanted to hear that all one more time in slightly different words,
I do not want to deprive the plants of a single mineral, of a photon, or of a component that is still working in those final hours in refinement of phytochemistry. People just don't have a basic understanding about how plants work. And really, there again are sufficiency requirements for minerals. If you deprive a plant of a particular mineral, especially say a small, tiny fraction of a trace mineral at that last stage of development, you're depriving biosynthese of a critical component to continue the refinement. Now the plant is having to make evasive maneuvers and use resources in a way that has removed the focus from the one thing that matters in that last 24 hours, which is, or in the last 10 days in the case of flushing or whatever amount of time. It's all about the refinement of the phytochemistry in the glandular trichome. That's it.
remember to party on. Do you want to keep an exact copy of that fire cut to grow time and time again? Well, you better be taking clones from here. Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. Growers have long talked about clonal drift or genetic drift. This is where, over time, a plant slowly changes its profile and becomes weaker or lower yielding as it goes from one clonal generation to the next clonal generation. This concept was kind of one of those topics that was looked at as bro science. There was nothing in the literature to back it up. But year after year, grower after grower, cultivators saw this degradation slowly taking place over time. Gotta ask yourself, like, is this why the roadkill skunk is still MIA? Is this why the sour D just doesn't hit like the sour D it did in the 90s? Clonal drift was the name given to this phenomena of slow genetic degradation over time. Now, as the years have gone by and we've learned more about this plant, we've discovered that there are actually a few factors that can impact clonal vigor and long-term health. Most people don't keep a single mother growing for years on end. What growers do is they will keep the same plant alive over the years by going from clone to clone to clone. And I've done it myself for nearly 8 years with a single cultivar. Cannabis can have what is known as a pathogen load. Certain pathogens can be present in the plant tissue, but not cause detectable differences. And as time goes by, pathogen loads, they can increase from one generation to the next generation. And this can cause a plant over time to lose vigor. Because we can't often see pathogen load with our eyes, the natural assumption was that this phenomena of genetic drift had happened. But no, it was pathogen load. There is also epigenetics. Some of you may be familiar with the terms genotype and phenotype. These terms relate to the plant's genetic potential and the actual expression. Well, epigenetics are another factor. The thought here is that the environment will also play a role in the plant's expression. It's kind of why the Florida OG grows differently in Colorado and grows differently in the Emerald Triangle. Trust me, epigenetics are the root cause of many arguments over who has the real cut. So if your environment drifts over time, so may the strain expression. The science behind epigenetics, which is real and recognized thing, it describes the process of modifications to the DNA. DNA methylation and histone modification can affect how genes are expressed without actually changing the plant DNA. Now, in normal terms, I've always described epigenetics as light switches turned on or off by environmental cues. Now, certain environmental factors can flip the on switch for certain expressions, whereas a grower with a different environment may never see the same nuanced expression even though they are growing the same clone. Pathogen load and epigenetics are two scientifically bad causes for what we considered in the past to be genetic drift. Now, you may have heard of this third one, hop latent viroid. This has been the scourge of the American cannabis industry for over a decade. HLVD can lay dormant in plants and show no physical signs, but it is highly transmittable and it easily spreads throughout the garden. If it becomes active, the HLVD that is, if it becomes active, yields can dramatically drop and there is a noticeable lack of plant vigor for no apparent reason. Most people call these effects dudding. Now, this was once thought to be the fabled genetic drift, but we now know otherwise. And a PSA, guys, sharing infected clones is one of the most common way HLVD spreads from grower to grower. Now, with all that said, what if I told you that genetic drift, aka clonal drift, was real? In short, it is the accumulation of somatic mutations leading to genetic mosaicism. And this brings me to the science that changes the game, if you couldn't tell by the big words there. But really, here's the mind-bending part of the story. Different parts of the very same plant are not genetically identical. Let that sink in for a second. We assume a clone is a perfect copy, but an adult plant is actually a genetic mosaic. It's a patchwork of cells with slightly different DNA. This happens because of somatic mutations. Every single time a plant cell divides to make new growth, it has to copy its entire DNA. Now, you could kind of think about that like copying your friend's homework. Tiny errors like typos, they can slip in during the process. And these typos, they can be thought of as those somatic mutations, and they can accumulate with increasing frequency each time the plant puts out new growth. This is why the location that you take your clone from on the plant is so critical. The very top of the plant, the main cola, it is the pinnacle of growth. It's constantly dividing and pushing upward. Because of this, it racks up a massive number of cell divisions. And if you probably haven't assumed already, the more divisions mean more chances for mutations. This isn't just a theory. It's been proven with DNA sequencing. A 2021 study titled Accumulation of Somatic Mutations Leads to Genetic Mosaicism in Cannabis demonstrates this. Now, what made this study particularly of interest to me is that these results are actually from cannabis plants. This isn't the cannabis world looking at a different plant study and assuming it applies to us. No, this is an actual study looking at these effects in cannabis. Researchers sequenced DNA from the top, middle, and the bottom of a single cannabis plant, and the results were kind of stunning. The top of the plant had accumulated the most unique genetic mutations by a wide margin, nearly 3 times as many as the bottom of the plant. Now, interestingly, some of these mutations were in an important gene that is tied to cannabinoid and terpene production, which could directly explain why growers may have seen potency and aroma fade over time. Now, it is important for me to say that the majority of isolated somatic mutations do not typically create a noticeable effect. But the majority of random mutations are deleterious, which is negative. So the long-term effect of their accumulation is often a decline in plant vigor, similar to what growers have described as genetic drift. Plus, I'll throw in the little anecdotal evidence here. The top of the plant gets blasted with the most intense light, UV, and heat. Now, all of that environmental stress can speed up the rate of DNA damage and mutation, basically aging the cells at the top of the canopy faster. But the lower and the middle branches, they're kind of sheltered, right? So they're protected, and that gives them a much more stable life. But that's just like my opinion, man. As I said, the study of accumulation of somatic mutation leads to genetic mosaicism in cannabis was originally published in peer-reviewed journals in 2021. Now, this research has been cited in many other scientific briefings since. But, being the wee nerd that I am, here's some footage from 2021 of me interviewing the lead author of this paper, Christian Adamick. It didn't take long for me to find out about this research, and I went straight to the source for more information.
Pathways. Another big thing was the fact that, as we vegetatively propagate, and we take clones from a mother plant, that's like asexual reproduction, right? Cannabis plant, we have it as dioecious, which means there's both male and female. So essentially, we're depriving it of the chance to have sex and essentially recombinate the DNA. And what that allows is essentially gives you a nice safeguard for mutations from appearing. But because we completely usually get rid of that sex that's happening, and we just have mother plants and just clones that constantly get taken, we don't get ever the chance for the plant to naturally kind of get a safeguard or reset or kind of recombinate the genes to, have a bit of more of a safety net. Recombination really, a big phenomenon that was, started, I believe, in the 1920s, if not 1920s or 40s. It's called a phenomenon called Muller's ratchet, where essentially the theory is, as an asexual population doesn't recombinate, it's going to accumulate mutations, and mutations are more likely to be negative, the term is deleterious, than positive. So, we have a lot of species that are vegetatively propagated, and I'm not saying this is something all doomsday. I'm just trying to make people aware of this, and people are in other species as well. I'm glad to bring it with cannabis and make them aware as well, and.
Here's the truth. By taking a cutting from the lower to middle branches, you are choosing the part of the plant with the fewest cell divisions and the fewest accumulated mutations. You are literally capturing the plant's DNA in its youngest, cleanest state. This is how you keep the vigor, the yield, and those amazing terp profiles strong for years to come. So when it's time to pick a new mom, don't just grab that beautiful, strong top. Instead, pick a healthy, vibrant branch near the lower third to become your next generation mother. You're resetting the mutation clock and giving your strain a fresh start. If a light bulb just went off for you and this is changing how you think about your mothers, please do me a favor and hit that like button. It tells the algorithm that growers want more of this deep dive content, and it seriously helps out the channel. So here's the bottom line. Clone from the lower or middle branches of your plant for longer term genetic stability. The science is crystal clear. Lower branches are biologically younger, and the middle carry a much smaller load of mutations. So making this your standard practice is the single best weapon you have against true genetic drift. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever watched a favorite clone-only strain seem to lose its punch over time? Did the smell fade, or did it just not hit the same after a few rounds of cloning? Let me know. Drop your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your experiences with this. ChadWestport.com is where you can find my gear and merch, and keep it locked here on the Chad Westport YouTube channel for more Westport University videos. And remember everybody, to party on! Hey guys, I just did a SCROG without a SCROG net, and I want to show it to you. So I probably should have started before I did all my work, but as you can see here, this plant is kind of laid out, like as if it were in a SCROG net. And as you can see, it's pretty clean here on the bottom, but as you notice, I have my binder clips and my freaking wire right there. So little binder clips and wire, and with that I was able to bend the branches and lay them down, and again I've created this nice level canopy out of all of the different branches of this plant. And I wanted to get some video of it right now because this has just been done. Now, what's going to happen is this is, it's really wide. It's actually going to get a little bit more narrow because when you look at, where I've like attached my lines from this point where the line is attached, everything here, because the plant's phototropic, it's going to go whoop, it's going to start growing straight up. But the same goes for all of these smaller side branches that were in here and getting buried beneath that much height. These are now also going to grow up, and there's a lot of them all the way around, and that's going to fill in the center of this plant as the outsides start curling back up too, and that's just going to create one heck of a bushy plant. But this is kind of how you SCROG without a SCROG net. One thing that I had done previously was to top this plant, and that really enables me to kind of spread out the branches like they are. So topping was part of this process. And if you're curious, this strain is the Lemon Cherry Pie from Raw Genetics. And of course, this healthy plant is sitting in the custom Westport blend, which you can find on the kissorganics.com website. But that was just my quick SCROG without a SCROG net demonstration. If you guys actually want to see me do this or demonstrate it, let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. Yeah, let me know. Thank you for watching. ChadWestport.com. Go and pick up some gear and stay locked on the Chad Westport YouTube channel. Remember though, to party on. I'm diving into the world of cannabis and challenging myself to touch on everything I can about it in less than 10 minutes. Hi, I'm Chad Westport. I've been involved with cannabis for over 30 years. I'm a graduate of SVC and WSU, where I studied sustainable agriculture and small farm systems. Commercially, I've worked at the largest indoor facility in our state, and I've consulted with our legislatures on the medicinal cannabis program. My background and training give me the experience to easily guide new growers through the home cannabis growing process. It's easier than you think and far more rewarding than unloved, mass-produced, chemically treated commercial cannabis. Enter the woo. Westport University. Cannabis is a plant that has been around for thousands of years. It has been an important part of human history in various ways, and yet it remains a mystery to many of us. From ancient Chinese medicine to modern-day recreational use, cannabis has evolved to become a highly debated topic with opinions divided on its benefits and its drawbacks. Fortunately, we are learning more about this plant and the human interactions on a daily basis thanks to the loosening regulations around the globe. Ironically, the majority of this research is being conducted by major pharmaceutical companies, and I'll explain why in just a few moments. One of the biggest misconceptions about cannabis is that it is legal everywhere in the US. Although it is still federally illegal, many states on their own have legalized it for medicinal and recreational use, but not all of them. This gray area has led to a lot of confusion, and it's essential to understand the laws surrounding cannabis in your area. Another misconception is that cannabis is a gateway drug, leading users to more dangerous substances. However, studies have shown this claim is largely exaggerated, and cannabis can actually be a safer alternative to certain prescription medicines. But look at the data from people when asked this very question and notice how this perceived risk decreases with the age group. Then there's the myth that cannabis is bad for your health. But research has shown that it can have numerous health benefits, from reducing chronic pain to managing anxiety. Lastly, many believe that cannabis is addictive. The reality is that it can be habit-forming, in the same way that a daily aspirin can help people with their aches and pains. I can attest to this for myself. When it comes to addiction risk, the reality is that it may exist, but at a minor level and not nearly as addictive as other legal substances like nicotine, caffeine, or even sugar. In addition to these misconceptions, there's a lot of misinformation about the health implications of cannabis. For example, some people claim that cannabis can cause schizophrenia, but the science behind this claim is still unclear, and more research is needed to understand the relationship between the two. Another myth is that cannabis is a cure-all, which is simply not true. We have this thing inside all of us called the endocannabinoid system, and the interactions are unique for each person. While cannabis can have numerous health benefits, it's not a replacement for medicinal advice. And it is essential to approach it with a critical and nuanced perspective. Education is key, and that's why you're here today. So what exactly is cannabis, and how does it work? In short, it's a plant, and its unique compounds bind with receptors in our bodies. There are many different types of cannabis, just like there are many kinds of roses. Each variety has subtle differences, from the growth pattern to the aromas and even the colors. What makes cannabis special is the cannabinoids it produces. The two most discussed and studied cannabinoids are THC and CBD. THC is a psychoactive cannabinoid responsible for the high effect, while CBD is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid with numerous reported health benefits. In 1963, Dr. Mishulam and Yuval Shivo first reported the molecular structure of cannabidiol, more commonly known as CBD. A year later, Dr. Mishulam co-authored a paper which described the molecular geometry of tetrahydrocannabinol, also known as THC. Although these two primary cannabinoids have been discovered, scientists were unaware of how and where they worked in the body. In 1988 and 1992 respectively, CB1 and CB2 receptors were discovered. They are our natural receptors for cannabinoids like THC and CBD. At the same time, Dr. Mechoulam discovered that our body produces two forms of cannabinoids, anandamide and 2-AG, which bind to these CB1 and CB2 receptors. These two important discoveries led us to identify and study the endocannabinoid system, or ECS for short. Believed to be responsible for homeostasis in the body, the ECS has been a major target for pharmaceutical companies ever since its discovery. The effects of THC can vary on the method of consumption, the individual's tolerance, and the specific strain of cannabis. CBD is non-psychoactive and has been shown to have anti-inflammatory properties. It can help with anxiety and sleep, along with many other ailments. Both THC and CBD, individually or together, have demonstrated anti-cancer properties. Terpenes are also an important part of the cannabis experience. Terpenes exist all over nature, from flowers to trees, to the fruits and vegetables in your kitchen. Many of your favorite household products contain terpenes for fragrance. Terpenes produced by cannabis work with the cannabinoids and other compounds in the plant to form what is called the entourage effect, or synergistic effect. The idea proposes that the multitude of compounds within the plant work together to create distinctive and effective benefits. Basically, the total sum is greater than the parts individually. In 2011, Dr. Ethan Russo published Taming THC. This paper laid out the concept and science behind the interactions between cannabinoids, terpenes, and our bodies. Let's talk about the different methods of consumption. A big misconception is that you have to smoke cannabis. Many people have never smoked in their lives, and they're not about to start now. The good news is that there are numerous ways to consume cannabis, and you can receive benefits without smoking or inhaling vapors from it. Each method has its pros and cons, and the effects can vary greatly. For example, edibles can take longer to kick in, but the effects last longer. Smoking or vaping can provide a faster high, which actually makes accurate dosing and titration easier to achieve. Topical creams and oils, they can provide localized relief, but typically do not provide psychoactive effects as the other methods I've just mentioned. When it comes to experimenting with new forms of cannabis consumption, the old saying is start low and go slow. You can always take more, but you can't take less. Essentially, start by trying a very small dosage. Wait for a while to gauge the effects, and then determine if more would be desirable. An often under-considered aspect of cannabis legalization is that it can also have a significant impact on the economy and society as a whole. 71% of adults under the age of 30 say that cannabis is good for the local economy, and 59% of them think it makes the criminal justice system more fair. Legalization has stopped the prosecution for possessing personal amounts of cannabis, which tend to target certain demographics more than others. If we look at these Pew polling results for Americans 65 or older, only 33% thought cannabis legalization was good for the local economy. Nearly the same number, 32% of that group, thought legalization made the criminal justice system more fair. This contrast goes to show the changing opinion of cannabis and how the younger generations signal hope towards full legalization. By legalizing cannabis, governments generate immense revenue. The industry creates jobs and can even reduce crimes related to illegal cannabis. Additionally, cannabis can provide a sustainable alternative and a healthier alternative to traditional medicines like pharmaceuticals. And perhaps that fact is still holding universal legalization back. Now ask yourself, why may that be? So what have we learned about cannabis today? From its historical context to its numerous health benefits, it's clear that cannabis is a complex and multifaceted plant that deserves our attention and understanding. By recognizing its potential benefits and separating fact from fiction, we can work towards a more informed and enlightened society. Thank you for watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on cannabis in the comments below. If you're interested in learning more, be sure to check out my other videos. I'll be posting new Westport University videos every week. Stop by chadwestport.com to pick up gear and merch, and remember everyone, to party on!